Van used to be a boring-ass office worker who lived in his office and went home only to sleep. However, one day, he wakes up as a 2-year-old boy and wonders where is he. He can't understand why his hands are so small, and he immediately runs around the room to see where he is. He goes straight to the window and gets mesmerized by the medieval castle and city he sees outside when suddenly, his maid Till comes running, thinking that Van is going to skydive without a parachute from the window. She helps him down and says that it is dangerous to stand at the window. And Van tells her that he was just mesmerized by the scenery, so he couldn't help but look. Till doesn't understand how Van is speaking high-level English at 2 years of age when he should be watching Skibidi Toilet and Fortnite Brainrot. Suddenly, Van recalls that he has faint memories of living in this place. He decides to do a quick recap and tells Till that his name is Van Ferdio and his father is Marquis Jalpa. He also remembers the names of his 3 elder brothers, and Till thinks that this is the second coming of Newton. Soon, it is breakfast time, and 3 maids surround Van to feed him because he is so damn cute. Van likes the attention he is getting because even though he has the body of a 2-year-old, he is actually a middle-aged perv inside. Suddenly, Van's father, Jalpa, asks his sons their plans for the day, and they tell him about the subjects they are going to study today. Next, Jalpa turns his attention to Van and asks what he will do. Van seriously answers that he knows nothing, so he will start from the basics and learn about the culture and history of their country. His brothers are dumbfounded on hearing him talk like that. But Jalpa starts laughing that he underestimated his youngest son. He thinks that Van will be talented in fire magic like him and his late wife and says that he has great hopes for him. Van already knows that there are different magic attributes in this world, but the nobles prefer the 4 basic elements that include fire, water, wind, and earth because they have high offensive power. All other types of magic attributes are seen as a disgrace, and all of Van's brothers have one of the 4 elements. Later that day, Van learns about their country from Till, and he gets excited to learn how many intelligent species are in their world. Till tells him that they have the usual roster of elves, dwarves, and others, but the rest of the maids tell her that a kid won't understand all that. Van tells Till not to pay attention to those ignorant bitches and begins asking her about magic tools instead. She tells him about magic crystals and rocks that can store magic and can be used to manufacture magic tools. While Van is learning just the basics, the old butler Esparta puts a bunch of books in front of him, saying that it is necessary to see how much he already knows before starting his education properly. Van is a bit intimidated by his mean-looking mustache, and tells Esparta that he can't read properly yet, but he knows a little bit of math. The butler starts with the very basics and asks him what 3 + 5 is. And when Van answers the question without counting on his fingers, the butler is so impressed that he decides to teach him personally. Van immediately knows it is going to be hell, and he is proven right as Esparta makes him study from dusk till dawn. But thanks to that, Van learns to read and write in just a couple of weeks. After that, he continues studying hard, and when he turns 4, it is time for his swordsmanship lessons to begin. His first training partner is Till, who can dodge like she is allergic to Van's wooden sword. He falls to his knees after failing to hit her even once, and Till teases him that she won against him. Van chases after her while pouting, but then the rest of the jealous maids hold Till down because she is insulting a noble. They tell Van to punish her for being rude, but he tells them that it is alright. However, the maids have a stick up their and they insist Van punish Till, so he just flicks her forehead and tells everyone that justice is served. For the next year, Van focuses on sword training, and by the age of 5, he can beat senior students because they are just kids with simple attack patterns, and he is a grown-ass man with a developed brain. The other students are impressed that Van is a genius even when it comes to combat, and they are even more overwhelmed when they see him treating them kindly even though they come from a lower social status. After that, Van takes a break when D, the deputy commander of the Knights, arrives there to check his hands. He finds that Van's hands are really smooth and there are no calluses, which makes him wonder how did he get so good without enough practice. Van tells him that he is too busy with his studies to train regularly, and D casually reveals that Esparta was ordered by the Marquis to make Van's lessons thrice as hard. This comes as a great shock to Van, but now he understands why his lessons were so long and so hard. D asks him if he is interested in learning sword fighting, because he will plead with the Marquis to reduce his lessons so that he can train to become the greatest swordsman of their country. Van tells him that he wants to focus on both his lessons and sword skills, and D decides to train him personally for the best results. He assures Van that he will go easy on him since he is just a kid, but that was a bigger lie than everything any politician has said. D's lessons are diabolically hard, But despite everything, Van enjoys the life after being reincarnated. Another year passes, and now the 6-year-old Van is known as a genius throughout his territory. However, he gets burnt out because his life revolves around books and swords. So one day, he tells Till that he wants to go outside. Soon, she takes him to the market along with 2 knights, and Van is thrilled to see different types of stores. He is curious about the grand building behind him, and Till tells him that it is the Merry Chamber of Commerce, which is a huge company with branches all over the country. Van realizes that this is just the Walmart of this world, when suddenly, he sees a man dragging a boy who looks really filthy and beaten up. The man tells Van to look away because it is not a show, and his knights get ready to remove the man's stupid head from his body for insulting a noble. Van stops them and asks the man why he is dragging that boy along, and he arrogantly replies that he is going to sell his son into slavery, and no one is going to stop him. This is the most shocking news for Van, but Till tells him that poor people in this world often sell their children into slavery to get some extra cash. Van is really appalled by this, but before he can interfere, a tanned mommy comes there, and she is really excited to see the youngest son of the Marquis. Till proudly affirms and shows off his family crest to the tanned mommy, who introduces herself as Rosalie from the Merry Chamber of Commerce. Van immediately asks Rosalie how much would the blue-haired boy be sold for, and she takes one quick glance at him and then asks his dad if he has any magic attribute. He replies that he has magic to steal things, and Rosalie says that the boy can only be sold for 3 large silver coins. This angers the old bastard, who starts kicking his son for being so worthless that his selling price is less than Sophie Rain's monthly OnlyFans subscription. Rosalie tells him to be kinder to his son, but he decides to take him to another shop to get a better price for him. Suddenly, Van offers to buy the boy for 5 large silver coins, and the bastard begrudgingly takes that offer. Van frees the boy and helps him get up, asking his name. The boy introduces himself as calm as he takes Van's hand and stands up. Van tells him that he is free to go anywhere he wants to now, and Till asks him why he is letting the boy get away when he just bought him. Van replies that he just wanted to help him. He then learns that Calm has nowhere to go and decides to take him to the mansion. The knights tell Van that he can't take a boy of unknown origins to the mansion normally, and he needs to take him in as a slave. Being a modern guy who hates slavery, Van feels hurt by that sentence. But since Calm is okay with that, he decides to follow the idea. Rosalie interrupts him and says that they need to finalize the slave contract before that and asks both the boys to hold her hands. She then uses a spell to cast the contract spell on Calm, creating a tattoo on the back of his hand to show that he now serves Van. With that, Van takes Calm to the mansion, and he soon becomes a talented and loyal servant. One day, Calm comes to tell Van that Dee is looking for him, and Van gives him a cookie to lie that he is not here. Calm takes the bribe and then says that Dee already knows he is here, but Van tells him to cook up a story if he needs to. He then notices that Calm is not wearing the gloves he bought for him, and he declares that he wants to show off his tattoo to the world because it is proof that he serves Van. However, when Van says that he really wanted him to wear the gloves, Calm immediately changes his mind. Just then, Dee knocks on the door, and Calm goes outside to tell him that Van is not here. Dee says that a servant just saw him go inside, but Calm says that the guy must be doing heavy shrooms in broad daylight. Dee doubts that because he can see the cookie crumbs around Calm's mouth, but he quickly wipes them and says that he must also be doing shrooms to imagine things. Dee is impressed by the slave boy's audacity to talk back to him to protect his master, so he decides to train him in place of Van. 2 more years pass, and Van turns 8, which means it is time for his appraisal ceremony. Everyone has high hopes for him, and they want him to become their lord because he is not only a genius but also treats everyone kindly. His father is also certain that Van will fire element magic like him, but all his hopes are replaced with disgust and disappointment when he learns that Van has talent in production magic. Jalma says that production magic is considered the worst kind of magic of nobles because it allows people to create swords and stuff using raw material and imagination. However, all of that can be done even without magic, and no one needs a noble who is just a glorified blacksmith. Jalma says that both he and his late wife are strong fire mages, and he can't accept that their son would have the weakest magic. He pulls out his sword and says that he should have pulled it out that night instead, but he will correct his mistakes now. Van is frozen in fear and doesn't know what to do but before his dad can strike him. His eldest brother Mersha steps up to defend him. He suggests that they have a remote village in their territory that is still not developed, and they should let Van develop it. Jalma asks him to elaborate, and Mersha says that the nameless village has only 100 residents and they don't have anything going for them. There are strong monsters in the mountains to the north, and there is another noble's domain right next to them. On top of that, their rival kingdom, Yeleneta, is just beyond the village. and they only hold some military training exercises there. Jalma also agrees to the plan because the Nameless Village is a recently acquired territory, and they are not really loyal to their family yet, which makes sending a family member there a great decision. He praises Mersha for finding a use for the disgrace of their family and tells Van to leave for the village as soon as he can. When everyone has left, Mersha apologizes to Van for proposing to send him to such a harsh place, but he didn't want him to die at their father's hand. Van thanks him for saving his life, and Mersha promises to help him as much as he can in living a comfortable life at the village. Soon, Van starts packing his stuff, and Till is furious at the Marquis for sending him to a faraway place. But he tells her that he is actually looking forward to it because he will have a lot of free time there. As his luggage is loaded in carriages, Van thinks how his dad didn't allow him to take any knights along, and Mersha had to hire adventurers to guard him. On top of that, he was only allowed to take Calm with him at first. But thanks to his brother's intervention, now Till is also coming with him. Suddenly, Dee comes there and tells Van that he is coming along to complete his training. Van absolutely doesn't want that and says that his father has forbidden the knights to go with him. Dee replies that he hasn't gotten any news about that, and he even brings 2 of his knights with him. That is not all, as Esparta also comes there, telling Van that he has taken an early retirement from this mansion, and he will come along with him to continue teaching him. Once the carriage starts moving, Van feels a bit disappointed that he can't even use the family crest right now because his dad wants to send him away secretly. However, the entire city is gathered to bid him farewell because the knights are carrying huge banners saying Van is leaving. Van panics on seeing that and asks what they are doing, and the knights tell him that they are just following Dee's orders and they can't take down the banners until he says so. But he is asleep right now. With that, the entire city bids Van goodbye, and he promises to return to them someday. Later, Van takes a small twig in his hand and uses his production magic to turn it into a sword, which would require some sort of nuclear reaction to change wood into metal. But what do I know? Calm and Till are impressed by this, and Van says that he just wants to see if there is a good way to use his magic that is said to be useless. Till then tells him that they are near the village now, and Van is excited to see it. He tells Calm that if he doesn't like the life at the village, he can always return to the mansion. He is ready to nullify the slave contract and assures Calm that he can serve Mersha, who will treat him well. Calm immediately refuses, saying that he has already sworn to serve Van, and he will stay with him till the end. Van gets a bit taken aback by this because it sounds like a proposal, which is something he never got in his past life. Suddenly, the carriage rattles and comes to a stop, and Van opens the window to learn what is going on. A knight tells him that there is trouble ahead because the village is under attack by some bandits. Van immediately calls for a meeting, and Dee tells him that the bandits are used to fighting, so the villagers won't stand a chance against them. There are around 50 of them, and though the thick wooden wall is stopping the bandits from advancing, they are using arrows to attack the villagers beyond that. Dee tells Van that they should fight the bandits because they can drive them off if everyone works together. But the leader of the adventurers, Ortho, refuses to cooperate. He says that his mission is only to guard Van till he reaches the village, and he will not let his men rush into a battle where they are at a disadvantage. Dee argues that the villagers are the first citizens who will be placed under Van's rule, and they should fight to defend them. Ortho tells him that these ideals are befitting a knight like him, but he and his men are adventurers, so knight logic doesn't apply to them. Dee has no counter to that, so he asks Ortho to protect Van while he and the knights fight off the bandits. He knows that he might die in the process and asks the adventurers to take Van and run back to the city if needed. However, Esparta objects to this obviously stupid plan. He tells everyone that he may look like an ordinary servant, but he is actually an elemental mage, and he will help them win the battle. Everyone finds that hard to believe, but Esparta declares that he will create a wall and the adventurers should fire ranged attacks from behind it. That will distract the bandits, and Dee and the knights will flank them at the same time. Esparta thinks that once the bandits are attacked from all sides, they will flee. Van asks him if he plans to stay back and fight, and the old butler affirms, saying that he needs to keep attacking to make the bandits focus on him. Van says that it is dangerous and he can die, but Esparta wants to go out in a blaze of glory. Van tells him that he can't die in a place like this after faithfully serving his family for decades, and he doesn't want the knights to die either. He knows that if he loses Esparta and Dee now, he will fail to develop the village on his own, and his father will surely execute him for his failures. That is why Van thinks of an alternative and announces that he will act as the decoy. Everyone is shocked on hearing this, until immediately refuses to let that happen. She says that she will be the decoy instead, and Calm is ready to take her place. Van replies that he doesn't want to see anyone close to him die. That is why he will become the decoy. He plans to ride the carriage and attack the bandits head-on, giving others the chance to attack them from the sides. Dee thinks it is too risky, but Van reminds him that he trained under him, so he won't die so easily. And even if he dies, there can't be a greater end for a noble than to die for his people. He draws his sword and tells Dee to leave his body behind in case he perishes, because he doesn't want his family's name to be stained by his death. Van's words move Ortho, who recalls how he was not happy to take the job of guarding a noble's son because he thought that all of them are arrogant assholes. However, when Van came to greet him and even praised him for looking cool and badass, his opinion changed a bit. Now that he sees Van risking his life for his people, he decides not to be a coward and announces that he will fight with him. Van tells him that this is above his payroll, but Ortho replies that he can't be cool and badass if he lets a boy risk his life in his presence. His friends agree with him, and then Dee steps forward too, saying that he can't let his lord risk his life when he is still alive. Esparta agrees with him, saying that he will have to teach Van from the beginning if he thinks risking his life is a good strategy. He immediately comes up with a new plan and creates an earthen wall in seconds before telling the knights and adventurers to flank the bandits from both sides. Ortho and his heavyweight friend rush to one side while Dee and his men rush to the other. Meanwhile, the other adventurers begin firing arrows from behind the wall, taking down a few bandits and distracting the rest. Their leader orders them to target the people behind the wall first, but Dee rushes in just then and takes out a bunch of them at once. Ortho, the adventurers, and the knights join the action as well. And if that was not enough to make the bandits leave shit stains on their underwear, Dee begins emitting a menacing aura that makes them run away. The bandit leader realizes that they can't win like this, so he charges towards the walls to kill the people behind them. Ortho tries to alert his team, but they can't react in time, and the Cyclops wannabe gets ready to swing his heavy axe at the green-haired nerd. Van comes in clutch just then and taunts the bandit leader to get his attention. He nutmegs the big dude and then slashes his knees from behind, making him fall to the ground. Calm joins the fight too and leaps towards the bandit leader using his axe as a foothold and delivers a devastating finishing blow. Soon after that, all the remaining bandits are captured, with Van's forces suffering no losses. Ortho is happy that they achieved the best possible result and says that once they receive their payment, their work here will be done. But he is a bit curious about Van now. He sees great potential in him and asks his team if they want to stick around and see what he can make of this nameless village. Half of them tell him that there isn't enough money in the village for them, but his core team stays behind because they have also seen Van in action, and they believe he is not an ordinary boy. They want to invest in him because they are certain he will make it big someday, and then they can cash in all the loyalty points. Meanwhile, Till rattles Van for risking his life and tells him to let her dive into danger the next time. Just then, Dee and others come there and tell Van that the villagers have gathered at the gate. He decides to step into the village with pride and hope, but as he sees the village, he loses a bit of both because they look weak and desolate. The village chief welcomes Van and thanks him for saving his life, and the first question Van asks is if the village has been attacked before. The old man affirms, saying that they have been attacked many times this year already. Van asks the reason for that, and the chief replies that earlier, the village was part of another territory, and knights patrolled it regularly. Ever since they became part of the Ferdio family territory, no one has come to look after them. Van apologizes for that and says that his father doesn't recognize the value of the small villages yet. This pisses off the villagers, and the old chief asks if nobles think small villages are not worth protecting because they don't pay much tax. Van tells him it is pointless to blame anyone, and this makes the villagers even more angry. They say that a noble would never understand what they go through, but Van says that they are talking about the future of the village, and his anger is unnecessary here. He says that the nobles are responsible for the condition of the village, but the laws written by the founder of the kingdom are the main reason. He says that blaming the law won't change anything, and they need to do something else to protect the village. The first way is to produce something so valuable that the kingdom can't ignore them. The second way is to earn enough money to hire mercenaries to protect themselves. And the final way is to work on the village and make it better. A village baddie tells him that they also thought of that idea, but they have nothing at all. Van tells her that things are different now because they have a new lord, and he will do everything to defend the village. Well, the villagers don't trust him because he is a kid, but when Esparta and Dee step forward and introduce themselves as the former head butler and the vice commander of the Night Order, the villagers suddenly grow confident that their village is in the right hands. The chief asks Van if he has powerful elemental magic, and he immediately makes it clear that the best he can do is production magic, so they should expect combat strength from him. The villagers start sulking openly and Van's ego takes a hit. Just then, a villager asks him what they should do about taxes, because currently they find it hard to pay 30% of their income. Van decides to cut it down to 10% till the village is stable and all the villagers already start liking him. Next, Van says that they need to work on the village's defenses and asks Esparta if the earth wall he creates is long-lasting. The butler replies that it lasts only for a little time before the mana runs out, and then it becomes just a pile of soil. Van decides to build a sturdy wall later, but asks Esparta to create one with magic in the meantime. The old butler immediately creates a huge wall all around the village, and everyone is dumbfounded on seeing that. After that, Van says they need pitfalls and traps to slow down any bandits, and Dee asks him to leave that to him. Van then turns to the villagers, saying that they need to work together to rebuild the village, because then making it a successful place won't be a far-fetched dream. After that, Van goes to the forest to test out his production magic fully. He takes a small wooden log and uses his magic to fully feel every inch of it. He then splits the wood into very fine threads and then weaves them into a strong pattern, creating a solid pride cube. Till and Calm ask what it is, and Van tells them that it is a nanomaterial cube, which is really strong. He creates a bunch of them, and soon Ortho and his friends pass by. They get curious about the RGB cubes, and Ortho asks if he can try cutting one. He tosses a block in the air and then swings at it with full strength, but the block hits a nearby tree, and there is not a single scratch on it. Ortho is in disbelief because his strike could cut through stone, but the nanomaterial cube is still intact. After that, Van starts experimenting with his magic some more and keeps creating weapons and stuff till the sun starts to set. Till asks if he is not tired because production magic is said to consume a lot of mana, but Van feels completely fine. He wonders how much mana he has and casually creates a katana from wood, because who cares about science and conservation of energy and matter when you have magic? Calm's eyes start gleaming on seeing a new kind of sword, so Van gifts it to him, and then Till starts watching him with pleading eyes as well. Van gives her an axe, and Till is not happy at all because it has a creepy skull design that doesn't go well with her cute vibe. Later that night, as Till and Calm sleep, Van sits in front of the campfire, unable to rest. He feels tired after traveling and fighting, and also filthy because he has not had a bath in days. He thinks that his servants act fine, but they must also be tired, and he needs to get some basic facilities before working on the village. So, the next day, Van begins piling nano cubes in an open space to create a house out of them. The villagers gather around to see what he is doing, and even Van is not sure if he can create something so big. However, he focuses on the details and steps to build a house. First, he erects sturdy pillars that will support the weight of the ceiling, and then builds walls around them. Next, he builds more rooms with doors and windows, and then adds the roof to complete the building. With that, his house is complete in an instant, and no one can believe that Van built a whole mansion in a matter of seconds. But he is happy that he now has a house to live in comfortably. The entire village and Van's friends keep staring at the mansion with their jaws dropping to the ground, until says that his production magic is more suitable for governing a territory compared to elemental magic. Van acts humble, saying that offensive magic is still better overall because it allows a noble to protect his people. He feels that people feel better under a noble who can cast fireballs as compared to a glorified construction worker. Till and Calm disagree with him and say that they would rather live in his town than in his father's, but Van thinks they are just biased towards him. But Esparta believes they are right. He tells Van that in times of war, people might prefer to live under nobles with strong attack power, but in peaceful times, his ability is the best for their development. Dee, Ortho, and others also share the same sentiment, and they tell Van how unbelievable it is that he created a house faster than Usain Bolt runs 100 meters. Van tells them that if they bring him wood, he can build houses for them too, and both Dee and Ortho get fired up to collect wood and get their house made first. Well, they are not the only ones who want to get a new house, and the village chief timidly asks Van if they bring lumber, he can build houses for them too. The villagers start telling him how their houses are broken and not worth living in, and Van realizes that it is going to be really exhausting to renovate all of them. However, he doesn't want to disappoint his people, and it is true that their houses are waiting to crumble at any moment. He agrees to build houses for them if they bring him wood for that, and everyone is overjoyed on hearing this. Soon after that, Van creates an entire residential block at once, and people are still in awe at his skills. They say that it is one thing to have a huge mana pool, but Van also knows how to plan a proper layout for a settlement. Van starts flexing his knowledge about architecture and design and says that he used the grid layout in which each unit is made of 4 houses with wide streets connecting them. For now, he has made all the houses uniform so that there is no fighting, but he plans to renovate them eventually once they have sturdier raw material to use. The villagers are extremely grateful and offer what little crops they have to Van as a gift. After that, Van creates a public bathhouse next to his mansion because he wants to take a bath daily. But the villagers are also curious about it. Till and the green-haired mage Pluriel tell Van to take a bath with them, and he freaks out on hearing that and reminds them that he is a full-grown man already. The girls get to take a bath first, and Pluriel says that Van is unlike any other noble she has met, and he is really kind and wise. Till immediately starts yapping about how awesome her master is, and once she is finished telling her new friend about all that, it is the boys' turn to take a bath. Van and Calm go inside first, and Van notices that Calm is building up muscles after training regularly with Dee. Speak of the devil. Dee and the knights come to the bathhouse just then, and then the muscle-brained idiot starts swinging his heavy sword in the public bath. After the bath, Van goes to rest in his room and flops on the bed, thinking that he can finally rest after an exhausting day. The next morning, he wakes up to find that the knights have dug a trench around the village to protect it from raiders, and Van says that they need to fill it with water for best results. They also need water for drinking, farming, and the public bath. So Van decides their next priority will be to secure a stable source of water. He immediately scouts a nearby water body, and then Esparta creates a small canal in that direction. Dee and the other boys start widening and lengthening the canal, and Van follows behind them, using his magic to stabilize the walls and the bottom of the canal to make them leakage-proof. He notices that Dee is having the time of his life digging the hard soil, and Esparta says that he is quite active for a man in his early 40s. Calm and the knights are working their asses off as well, and Van thinks that it will take at least a week for the canal to be complete. However, he is determined to secure water for the village because once they have all the basic facilities, merchants will start visiting them, and he can improve everyone's standard of living. Well, Van seems to have overestimated the enthusiasm of his workers, and just by the end of the day, they are halfway to the village. Van says it is enough and tells them to stop, and Dee asks him what the issue is because he can keep going. Van tells him that not everyone has Big D energy like him, and Calm and others are trembling like their mom's favorite toy. Dee realizes that not everyone is built like him, so he agrees to take a break for the day, even though he still has enough stamina to finish the canal on his own. The canal is finished the next day, and everyone involved gathers at the river to witness its inauguration. Van tells Esparta to open the gate, and he shatters a stone plug to let water flow into the tunnel. Everyone applauds as they see water flowing steadily in the canal they created, and the villagers are astonished on seeing so much water at once. Soon, the water fills the trenches around the village, but Van fears that it might lead to flooding once the rains start. He decides to dig a lake behind the village so that they can avoid that, and Esparta says that it will also act as a reservoir for dry weather. Soon after that, Van and his friends build a lake behind the village, and the entire village gathers there to see it. They can't control their happiness on seeing it, and the village chief thanks Van because now they won't have to trek for a mile to get water for their families. A few days later, Van reinforces the village wall by adding bits of stone into mud and then turning them into concrete with his production magic. Everyone is sure that with such a sturdy wall, it won't even matter if the bandits attack them. But Van is not satisfied. He decides to make their defenses even stronger by installing ballistae on top of the wall and puts shields in front of them so they can attack the enemies while remaining safe from their ranged attacks. Van says they are just basic things, but everyone disagrees with him because they look really cool and impressive. They think that no one will dare to mess with their village now, and Esparta says that it is wrong to call this place a village because it is already starting to look like a fortress. Dee says that if Jalpa knew Van was capable of this, he would never have sent him away and would have even made him his successor immediately. Esparta disagrees, saying that Jalpa gives much more importance to combat abilities, and he would never have appreciated Van's talent fully. Dee argues that Van has more than enough combat strength, and he is probably stronger than anyone out there. Esparta argues back that Van's power is great for protecting people, but he can't conquer other territories. Dee takes this as a personal insult and says that war is more than just soldiers clashing swords with each other. Seeing that the two men are getting more serious than they should, Van asks them to stop. He says that arguing about talent and its use won't do them any good, and they need to try their best to live a better life with what they have got. Dee starts laughing on realizing his mistake, and he agrees with Van, saying that he will become a great ruler, no matter where he is sent. He confidently says that one day he might even have a domain that rivals his father's, but Van is more interested in breakfast because he is really hungry. He enjoys the breakfast. Till makes it for him, and she is glad that he likes it, because they are a bit short on ingredients. Van realizes it is a worrisome thing, and Esparta tells him that improving the village defense is a good idea, but they need to also worry about its income. They don't have any connections except the merchants who come here once per month. Van replies that he can take care of furniture and cutlery, and the villagers produce enough vegetables to sustain themselves, so they can manage just fine. Esparta wipes off the piece of omelet from his mustache as he tells Van that they don't have any seasonings here, and they also don't have the ingredients for the baked desserts that Van loves so much. Van is shocked to hear this and immediately turns towards Till, looking like she betrayed him. He decides to set up a special industry that will get this village all the money it needs. He asks his team to give him some ideas immediately, and Calm suggests that they can sell the nanocubes because they are a revolutionary material. Van refuses that idea immediately because only he can use them. Next, Till says they can hunt monsters for materials, but Van shoots down that idea as well because only the adventurers and the knights can do it. Esparta thinks that it is hard to find something special in this village, so Van decides to think hard about it. Later that day, he runs into the fatty from Ortho's group, who says that his servants seem to love him a lot because when he asked them to show what their weapons could do, they refuse to let the weapons be ruined by using them. Van is disappointed in both of them and says that weapons are meant to be used, and if they keep them stored up their ass, they won't help them when the time comes. Van encourages them to use their weapons, and the horizontally gifted adventurer pulls out a shield made from orc leather. He claims that it is really sturdy and can measure the power of their weapons and encourages them to attack him. Calm reluctantly agrees to do so and gently taps the shield with his katana. Mr. Plus-sized asks him to put more force into it because that doesn't even count as an attack. But the very next moment, he notices a part of his shield falling to the ground. He can't believe that the shield he just got made is destroyed now. And on top of that, Van tells him that the sword looks like metal, but it is only made of wood. This makes Fatty cry really hard, but Van fixes his shield with his magic instantly. Just then, Ortho arrives there, and he asks Van if he wants to buy some valuable ores from them. Van is astonished to see him carry a cart full of rare minerals, and Ortho explains that the mountains near the village are full of ores and minerals, and they don't even have to go far to get them. He has got some iron, copper and silver ore, and also a little bit of gold. However, the most valuable find is mithril ore, and Van goes crazy on seeing it. He wonders why no one else has found out the resources in the mountains before, and Ortho says that this place is just too far away and inconvenient for anyone to bother to look. After that, Van decides to work on the iron ore and turns it into a nanocube as well. Fatty gets excited on seeing it and asks Van if he can make swords with that. Van still feels bad about his shield, so he agrees to make one for him, and Fatty asks him to make a short sword and a long sword. Van works on the short sword first, carefully imagining all the details to make it durable, sharp, and also beautiful. Fatty is delighted on seeing the sword, and the rest of the adventurers swarm him to get a closer look, while Van creates a longsword in the same design. This makes the adventurers go cray-cray, and they ask Van if he can make swords for them too. He decides to make one each for them because they brought the ores, and then Pluriel tells him that the swords look like they can sell for a lot. Van thinks that if he can make swords out of mithril, they may sell for even more when Esparta arrives on the scene. He checks the mithril ore and says that it is very rare to find, but if the adventurers found it in the forest before even entering the mountain, it can only mean that there is a dungeon nearby. He says that if a dungeon is discovered here, the village will suddenly shoot into the limelight, and thousands of people will come here each day to explore the dungeon. While it will be a major boost for their economy, Van knows that they are not in the condition to support that many people. On top of that, he fears that they will be attacked by the rival country and even the neighboring nobles for the dungeon. Pluriel says that if a dungeon is found, Van's father will immediately dispatch the knights to protect it, and Van replies that his father has practically disowned him, so he will be sent somewhere else if this village becomes important. Pluriel now understands that Van wants to develop the village more and make it his permanent territory before discovering the dungeon and reporting it. And Ortho says that they will try not to go to the region where the dungeon can be. His friends also agree, and Van thanks them for keeping it a secret, even though they would profit more by being the ones to discover the dungeon. Soon after that, Van renovates the village once more with better quality materials, and Till is worried that he is overworking himself. Just then, a villager comes running and yells that a pack of armored lizard monsters is approaching the village. Van immediately orders everyone to get inside the walls and then locks the gates. The villagers are terrified of the monsters, but Van asks them to fight alongside him because together they can defeat any obstacle in their way. The villagers are motivated by Van's pep talk, and they swear they will fight till their last breath to protect the village. Van tells them to immediately head to the wall and position themselves behind the ballistae. Com tells him that Ortho and his party went out hunting, so they need someone to take command of the situation, and Van decides to head up with the rest of his citizens. However, Till grabs his arm with tears in her eyes, and Van may not be a simp, but he doesn't want to hurt her. He asks Dee to head up and relay the situation to him in real time. While he stays on the ground and issues orders, Dee accepts his order and rushes up to the wall, and the sight in front of him leaves him stunned. He tells Van that about 40 armored lizards are heading towards them, and they are about 8 meters tall, which is equal to 3 elephants standing on each other's shoulders in freedom units. Dee starts panicking on seeing this because even a group of veteran knights struggles to take down a single armored lizard. And right now, they have only a handful of trained fighters. Van commands him to load the iron arrows into the giant crossbows, and he immediately moves ahead to do that. His knights tell him that normal weapons don't work against the tough scales of the armored lizards, and Dee knows that too. He says that till now, he has won all the battles he has fought. But this time, he wants to trust his gut and let Van take the command. He orders everyone to load their ballista, and then commands them to fire. The arrows vanish as soon as they hit the lizards, and it takes a moment for Dee to realize that there is a huge hole wherever the arrows hit. The armored lizards hit by the arrows fall to the ground after a few seconds of inertia pushing their body forward. And just in the first volley, the villagers take down 10 of them. Dee is impressed by the quality of the weapons made by Van, and also by the villagers who for some reason can aim better than my Call of Duty teammates in ranked matches. He tells everyone to get ready for round 2, and the knights tell him that they only have 1 iron arrow left for each ballista. Dee tells them to load and fire nevertheless, and they manage to take down more armored lizards. However, half of the lizards are still left, and they are out of ammo. Dee relays the message to Van, who begins to come up with a solution to the problem, when he suddenly remembers that Calm's wooden sword managed to cut through Fatty's high-spec shield. He thinks it might work against the armored lizards too, and tells Dee to use the wooden arrows. The knights think this is plain stupidity because wood is not going to make it through the lizard's skin that is tough like steel. Dee tells them to shut the hell up because Van has already proven them wrong multiple times, and he is going to trust what he says. He orders the villagers to load the wooden arrows and shoot, and even the wooden arrows manage to pierce through the lizards, even though they get stuck midway. Luckily, that is enough to hit their vital organs and kill them immediately, and now Dee knows that no one can beat them. He tells the villagers to load and fire once again, because tonight they are going to feast on lizard meat. The villagers follow his command and make it rain arrows on the armored lizards, wiping out whatever is left of them. Dee proudly declares their victory to Van and the rest of the villagers, who start cheering loudly. Till hugs Van tightly, and he is still trying to process that his wooden weapons actually worked against powerful monsters. Back on the top of the wall, the knights remark how no one from their side got injured, and they still have a lot of ammo left. Dee thinks that the battle was over so quickly that he feels a bit disappointed, but it just shows how OP Van's ability is. Soon after that, the villagers start processing the lizard corpses under the guidance of Ortho's party, who returned quite late. Ortho tells them to preserve the eyes, fangs, skin, and magic core for selling, while the meat is to be stored for eating. He says that usually processing armored lizards takes a lot of time and most of the meat rots before they can use it. But thanks to the knives Van has made, the work is really easy. Just then, Van arrives there and inspects the mountain of meat and decides to throw a huge party to celebrate their victory. At night, the festivities begin and people get to eat as much meat as they can. Ortho's group talks to Van and tells him that the weapons he made for them work really well. Dee overhears this and asks Van if he made weapons for the adventurers before him, and Ortho's group begins to show off their swords. Dee gets jealous on hearing this and asks Van to make a sword for him, and he is willing to write him a blank check for that. The other knights also want weapons made by Van, and he timidly tells them that he can't take any money from them, but he is a bit busy right now. He promises to make them new gear after the village affairs are sorted, and the knights are happy with that. After that, Ortho tells Van that usually an armored lizard sells for 20 gold coins, but since most of the meat will rot, he can get about 8 gold coin per lizard. That is still a lot of money, and Van gets overwhelmed thinking about how he will use all that money. Esparta breaks some bad news to him, telling him that when a village earns more than 100 gold coins, they have to give half of it to the Marquis as taxes. Van feels like he lost his life's savings in a crypto scam on hearing this, and asks if there is any way they can commit tax fraud. Esparta tells him that they can't hide the sale of so much material, and Van loses all hope. However, he is more worried about his father discovering the importance of this village, because then he will exile him to some other faraway place. Suddenly, Esparta comes up with a solution, and says that they can compromise on the situation by reporting to Mercia instead of Jalpa. Van realizes that they can give the glory of defeating the lizards to his elder brother, which will cover up their actions and let them stay in this village for longer. The next day, two merchants come to the village and they get bamboozled on seeing the huge fortress-like wall in front of them. They start blaming each other for reading the Google Maps wrong and losing the path, when suddenly, Van appears on top of the gate and welcomes them to his village. The merchants are shocked because they recognize Van as the genius son of the Marquis, and wonder why is he in such a remote place. They introduce themselves as Belle and Rango from the Merry Chamber of Commerce, and Van lets them in. As soon as the merchant brothers reach the warehouse, their jaws drop halfway to the floor on seeing the materials harvested from the armored lizards. They find it hard to believe that such a tiny village hunted all these monsters, but Van just wants to know if they can buy all this stuff from them. The merchants immediately say yes and ask Van to wait for a month because they need to arrange for a whole team to evaluate and transport everything. Van agrees to that and asks them to take some meat for free because it is going to rot anyway since he can't create a fridge right now. He then asks the brothers to take a look at some weapons that are also for sale, and they are blown away by the quality. They immediately agree to Van's asking price without bargaining, and he asks them to promote them. The brothers hesitate to answer that question, and Van realizes that these noobs think they are pros who can monopolize the trade of his swords. He tells them that even if they try to keep it a secret, people will find out about the village because they can find out the route they take. The brothers are shocked to hear this, and Van tells them that there is another way they can make insane profit. They are eager to hear that, and he tells them to set up a shop in their village. The brothers immediately take up that offer and bow before Van to show their gratitude, and he tells them that they should build their shop right away, before they can even understand what he is talking about. Van creates the shop they always dreamt of opening, and tells them that he is looking forward to doing good business with them. Soon after that, Van gets two guests that he is not expecting at all. One of them is a noble girl nearly his age, and the other one is a badass night mommy guarding her. The night mommy is already judgmental and declares that she will find out if Van is really a genius or a poser. Meanwhile, Van is getting homework from Esparta, who tells him to plan a city for 10,000 people to live in, because at the rate they are developing this village, it will become a city in no time. He asks Van what kind of fortress city he wants, saying that square-shaped fortresses are most common. However, Van can't not be extra, and he says he wants to build a star-shaped fortress because that will force attackers to waste a lot of time trying to cover the defense points he will set up around the fortress. Esparta likes the idea and starts helping Van with it, when the redhead knight barges into the room, saying that an emissary from the neighboring Ferdinando County is here to see him. Van lets them in, and they turn out to be the same noble girl and the mommy knight. He greets them, and the mommy introduces herself as Mira, who became a viscountess after rising from the rank of a knight. The girl nervously introduces herself as Art, the youngest daughter of Count Ferdinando, and Van asks both of them to have a seat. Mira immediately asks Van why he thinks they are here, and he says they are here to assess him and win him over if he seems like a threat. She starts laughing on hearing that because Van is correct, and then says that Count Ferdinando thinks that Marquis Jalpa sent his genius son to rule this village because he wants to conquer his territory. However, Mira thinks that Van was sent here because he doesn't have elemental magic. Van decides to come clean and tells her that she is right about the elemental magic stuff, but he is not here to lead any sort of war, and he was just exiled by his father. Mira refuses to believe that after seeing how much Van has developed the village in a short time, and she believes that around 5,000 soldiers were sent with him to turn this village into a military base. Van breaks out into a laughter on hearing that, and then apologizes before telling Mira that he was kicked out of the family with nothing but his luggage and calm, and no one even came to see him off. Mira asks if she is hallucinating the butler and the deputy knight commander then, and Dee says that he came to complete Van's training of his own accord, and he has ignored messages from the knight commander to return to the city. Esparta also tells her that he retired and is now teaching Van as a hobby, and Till says that she wants to serve Van forever because he treats everyone kindly, no matter their social class. That still doesn't explain the rapid development, and Van decides to give his guests a demo because that will be faster. He takes them outside the village and asks Esparta to create an earthen wall so that he can turn it into a fortress-grade wall. Mira is impressed by the old butler's magic, but she says that the wall will crumble as soon as it loses mana. Van immediately uses his magic to transform the mud wall into solid concrete, and then uses some wood nanocubes to create a gate. Mira and Art are bamboozled on seeing this, and ask Van about his magical attribute. He replies that he can use production magic, which is considered the worst kind of magic, and that is why he was exiled here. Hearing that reminds Art of her own unfortunate life, and then Mira decides to get to her second agenda. She tells Van that she was sent here to offer Art's hand in marriage to him, and he understands that the Count wants to give him his daughter so that he doesn't try to conquer his territory. He tells Mira that a marriage is unnecessary because he doesn't want a conflict with anyone, and he is just developing the village because he wants to live a peaceful life here. Mira tells him that she initially wanted to prevent Art being engaged to the lord of a small nameless village because she would not find happiness in such a shabby place. But after seeing Van's potential and character, she supports their marriage. She starts praising his intelligence, charisma, and the willpower to turn hardships into challenges, and says that if it was legal, she would want to marry him herself. Van gets excited at the idea of having a mommy waifu, but unfortunately, he can only get Art right now. Mira turns to Art, asking if she wants to marry Van because she honestly can't find a better man. Art turns shy and says that Van is a good guy, but she has not thought about marriage yet. Van also tells her to take her time because it is the most important decision of her night, and Mira says that they are going to stay the night in the village so they can think then. Van is shocked to hear that they are staying over, but when Mira asks if he has a spare room in a mansion, he decides to build an inn for them instead. After that, they have dinner, and Van decides to know more about the girl who might become his future waifu. She tells him that she likes cute things like flowers and dolls, and Van asks if he can see the dolls she has. Art is glad that someone is taking an interest in her, and she happily agrees to show Van the dolls in her carriage. Later, Van walks the two ladies to the inn, and Mira leaves the two kids alone so that Art can tell Van that he is a nice guy before running to her room. Van then returns to his mansion, where Esparta tells him that since the Count sent his daughter to marry the lord of a nameless village, she probably isn't an elemental mage either. Van now realizes that Art was also exiled from her home, and he decides to let her stay in the village if she wants to, even if they don't get engaged. The next morning, Till and Calm wake up Van in a hurry, and he asks them the reason for interrupting his dream when he was just about to kiss Sydney Sweeney. Till tells him that he has more important things than that in real life, and Dee and Esparta have already reached the site. Van asks them to at least tell him properly about what is happening, and Till says that he will know everything after he reaches Lake Van, the same lake he created a few days ago. Van is shocked to learn that the villagers named the lake after him, and he immediately makes a note to stop them from naming the village after him too. He soon reaches the lake to find that the entire village is already there, and Dee leads him straight to the cause of the commotion, which is a mermaid hiding in the lake. Esparta tells Van that mermaids usually live in beautiful rivers in deep forests where humans can't reach to pollute them. However, a few mermaids have appeared in the lake that Van made, and no one can understand how such a rare species came all the way here. Van decides to talk to the mermaid to learn why she is here, but she doesn't respond to his questions. He wonders if she is deaf or if she just can't understand human language, and comes up with another method that will surely work. He orders Till and Calm to bring some meat, and as Van thought, everyone understands the language of food. The mermaid swims towards him on seeing the roasted meat and asks if she can really eat it. Van tells her that it is all hers, and as soon as the mermaid eats it, she realizes that it is the meat of the armored lizard. She asks who defeated the armored lizards, and before Van can act humble and give credit to the village's teamwork, everyone unanimously declares that it was Van who defeated them all. The mermaid is satisfied on learning that, and she immediately goes underwater and vanishes. Van wonders if she will return soon, but Esparta doesn't see that happening because mermaids are more shy than Bigfoot. Surprisingly, the next day, the entire mermaid clan turns up at Van's door, and he is dumbfounded on seeing them. He is pretty sure they are here because he defeated the armored lizards and wonders if the mermaids worship those big scaly monsters. Esparta calls his idea idiotic and says they should ask the mermaids directly. Suddenly, the big and scary looking leader of the mermaids comes forward, thanking Van for treating his daughter nicely last day. Van tells him that he is welcome, and then the Mermaid King asks if he really defeated the armored lizards. Van affirms but adds that it was a team effort, but no one bothers to listen to that part, and they start gossiping and murmuring that a kid defeated such powerful monsters. The Mermaid King suddenly calls Van a hero and declares that he has the permission to marry his daughter Lotta. Van is taken aback on hearing this, and the Mermaid King asks him if he is not into lowly. He assures him that when Lotta grows up, she will be the mommiest mommy of them all. But Van can only look at the present, and he tells the Mermaid King that his daughter is a mere child right now. He says that Lotta doesn't seem to understand the concept of marriage as opposed to the other girl trying to tie him in forever, and asks the king if he has any reason he is offering her hand in marriage. The Mermaid King solemnly replies that they usually don't like hanging out with humans, but recently, armored lizards have infiltrated their territory and killed a lot of them. So he is willing to marry off his daughter to any hero who can defeat them. Van understands his logic now and tells him that he doesn't need to marry his daughter to him to ensure the safety of his people. He tells the Mermaid King to let Lotta marry whomever she wants when she grows up, because he is going to help them just for the love of the game. The Mermaid King asks if his people can stay in the lake if that is fine with Van, and he is ready to let them join his village. He immediately builds 2 floating rest houses in the middle of the lake, and the mermaids immediately feel at home there. Just then, Esparta reminds Van that they need to deal with the sewage, and the Mermaid King gets curious about that. Van explains their village architecture and how they use a giant flush system to send their waste away from their sewers. The Mermaid King offers to help since his people are skilled at waterbending and stuff, and thanks to them, Van's work becomes really easy. The Mermaid King asks him to leave the job of flushing sewage to the water dwellers, because that is the least they can do in exchange for a safe living space. Just then, Art and Mommy Mira arrive there, and they are shocked to see mermaids. The Mermaid King suddenly calls Van's son-in-law and thanks him for helping them, which shocks both the human girls. Mira asks Van if he married a mermaid when Art was the first in line, and before he can clear the confusion, Lotta proudly declares that she is Van's wife. This makes things worse between Van and Art, so he calls her out for a boating session the next day so he can clear the misunderstanding. Art tells him that she already heard the details from Mira earlier, so there is no confusion anymore. Van is glad to hear that, and then Art starts praising him for building a lake and developing his village so much. Just then Lotta comes there to greet him, and she gets jealous of seeing him with another girl when he is already her husband in her mind. Suddenly, more mermaid children also arrive next to the boat, and they begin calling Van the Meat Lord while rocking the boat and causing Art to accidentally fall on top of him. The kids stare at the scene in curiosity while Art gets nervous, but Lotta becomes even more jealous. She again asks Van what is this strange girl doing with her husband, and he reminds her that he turned down her father's offer, so they are not even engaged yet. Lotta just pouts and goes underwater on hearing this, and the other mermaid kids start hollering at Van for bullying their princess. They start rocking the boat really hard, and Art clings tightly to Van, who keeps bribing the kids with meat, but they don't fold. Later, the Mermaid King himself comes to confront Van, who is terrified of his stern expression. The Mermaid King says that he heard from Lotta that Van was flirting with another woman when he is already married. Art gets scared on hearing this, but Van makes it clear that he never said yet to marrying Lotta. However, the Mermaid King is not here to listen to logic, and he declares that they will have a competition between the merfolk and Van's people. If the merfolk win, Van will officially recognize his marriage to Lotta. Van is about to turn him down when Dee suddenly accepts the challenge on his behalf. He promises Van that as the deputy commander of the Knight's Order, he will surely bring victory to him. Even Esparta agrees with Dee for once, saying that the sooner they settle this issue, the more time Van will have for his studies. Mira is also nearby, and she also agrees with the idea. Van says that if he loses, he will have to get married right away, but Till and Calm tell him that there is no chance he will ever lose. He doesn't know how to stop them from Dee riding him all the time, and in the end agrees to the competition. The Mermaid King says that they can hold a 3-event competition to be fair, and gives Van the chance to pick the first event. Well, instead of picking something where he will have a clear advantage, Van chooses to hold a game of water polo, which is going to be equally tough for both sides as no one has any idea how to play it. Van first creates a pool in the middle of the pond and then begins explaining the rules to everyone. Esparta is surprised because he has never heard of a game like this, and Till says that Van is really great because he knows things that even the old butler doesn't. Anyway, Mommy Mira tells Van the swimsuits he made are really good for attracting gooners to this anime, while Dee is busy flexing like your average gym bro. Van asks Mira if she is going to take part in the game too, and she affirms, saying that she needs him to marry Art instead of the mermaid princess, and she has to do whatever it takes to protect him. Soon, the game begins with Mira and Till representing Van's village, while Lad and her dad play for the mermaids. As soon as the game starts, the Mermaid King scores a service ace, and soon the two mermaids begin overwhelming the humans, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone with more than 3 brain cells. Till starts losing hope on seeing the massive point difference by half-time, But Mira gets furious on hearing this and asks if her loyalty to Van will lose before such a small challenge. Her words fire up Till, and together they start taking back points from the mermaids in the second half. After a fierce second half, both the teams are at match point, and everything hangs on the next point. Mira jumps up to block the Mermaid King's spike, but he gets past her and Till is unable to defend it either. With that, the mermaids win the first round and Till is disheartened, but Mira acts like my cousin when he binge watches Haikyuu for the 8th time. Van is not happy to see her acting hopeful, even though they lost the first game, and then the Mermaid King approaches him with the second game idea. He keeps it simple and says they will do a swimming relay race, and Van realizes that he is screwed because it is going to be impossible to beat mermaids in water. However, D says that it will be super easy, barely an inconvenience, with him there, and Calm also volunteers to join the team. Soon, the competition begins with Lotta and Calm taking off. And as everyone expected, Lotta immediately takes a comfortable lead. Calm works his ass off to catch up to her, but Lotta is simply chilling, and she goes underwater to swim even faster to tag her teammate. Calm somehow follows her, and as soon as he tags D, the real game begins. D starts doing the butterfly stroke, which is the most difficult way to swim, and Van wonders why the hell did he choose that over the front crawl. The other knights tell him that butterfly stroke allows D to use his muscles to the full, and he rushes forth like a motorboat, overtaking the mermaid and winning the competition. The Mermaid King can't believe that they lost at swimming, but D is proud of his achievement. He happily walks out of the pond, unaware that he swam so fast that his swimwear was torn off from water pressure. After that, the Mermaid King approaches Van, still unable to digest his defeat, but ready to settle the matter once and for all. He asks Van to pick the third and final game, and he comes up with an idea that should be equally fair for both sides. He creates an ice shaving machine and then asks Pluriel to create some ice that he shaves and puts flavored syrups on. Everyone is confused about what they have to do, and Van says that the final competition is shaved ice eating contest, and he is going to take part in that himself. He asks for a partner, and Art raises her hand, shocking everyone. Soon, everyone is gathered in the Mermaid Wrist House, and the 4 participants have a huge bowl of shaved ice in their hands. Van wonders if it is too big, while Mira tells Art that it is still not too late to switch places. However, she refuses to stop fighting for her future husband, and as soon as Esparta gives the signal, everyone starts chugging in the shaved ice. Not a single one of them can escape the brain freeze that comes with eating shaved ice. But the Mermaid King is determined to make Lotta marry Van at all costs. He powers through the brain freeze and starts eating the shaved ice, and Lotta follows his example. Van thinks they are going to lose now, but Art gets over her brain freeze and starts eating the shaved ice 1 spoon at a time. That gives Van courage to keep fighting, and he rejoins the eating spree. After a few minutes of the most intense ice eating contest ever, Van and Art finish their bowls, winning the competition. The Mermaid King gracefully accepts his defeat, and Van is glad that now he won't be pressured to marry Lotta anymore. However, the Mermaid King still calls him his son-in-law and says that he has proven to be even more worthy of his daughter. He leaves for his home with that, and the perplexed Van wonders what was even the point of the competition. Just then, his stomach starts hurting because of eating too much ice, and everyone gathers around to check up on him. Meanwhile, Mira tells Art that she did a good job, but she can only keep watching Van as he is surrounded by his loyal friends. She wonders how can she enjoy the same kind of attention as him, because she has always been neglected since birth. When she was little, her father was always busy with work and barely made any time for her. Her mother wasn't interested in raising a kid either, so she handed her over to a nanny and went backpacking across Europe. No one paid her any attention as she grew up because she was timid and borderline dumb. The only good thing about her was her marionette magic, with which she could control puppets perfectly. Art thought that she could impress her mother with this, but she was horribly mistaken. Her mother slapped her and abandoned her because marionette magic was not considered useless, but evil in the hands of nobles. Everyone ignored her after that, and when she turned 10, her father sent her off to marry the lord of a nameless village. She was worried, but Van turned out to be a really kind man, and despite having a useless type of magic, he was still confident and everyone loved him. Seeing him now, Art decides to practice even more with her puppetry magic, so that one day, everyone will love her for that. The next day, Van gathers the villagers for some construction work and hypes them up with the promise of a barbecue party at night. Just then, Art comes there to greet him and asks if she can see him work, because she wants to be more like him. Soon after that, Van finishes building the star-shaped fortress wall he dreamt of for his future city, and Art is dumbfounded on seeing that. She asks how could he build something so sturdy and huge in just 2 weeks, and Van just gives credit to everyone who worked together with him. Mira is impressed by what he can do, but Van is equally impressed by her gravity-bending plot. Mira notices the little pervert gawking at her, so Van starts explaining that as more people move into his territory, they will build more houses and shops to accommodate them. Mira replies that she is jealous of him because she has always dreamt of having her own land that she would govern. She declares that she will just earn a lot of glory in her next battle, and that will be enough to earn a land of her own. With that, she asks Van about the giant ballista mounted on top of the fortress wall, and he tells her that it is the upgraded version of the simple ballista he created in the past. He begins yapping about how the new model can fire 2 bolts one after the other and is much stronger, but Mira is curious to see the weapon in action instead of listening about it. Van immediately tells Calm to fire a test shot, and he immediately obeys his command. As soon as he lets the first arrow loose, it goes a mile away and causes a giant dust cloud after demolishing its landing spot, and while everyone is stunned silent, Van is pleased with the result. He tells Mira that with 100 of those ballistae, he can properly defend his territory, and she immediately requests him to sell one to her. She is willing to pay any price he asks for, but Van just smiles and tells her that those bad boys aren't for sale. Mira decides to pay with other methods and tells Van that she will do him any favor he asks in exchange for a ballista, and that is enough to convince the little pervert to change his mind. He tells Mira that he will cash in the favor later and asks her how will she take it with her. She replies that she will arrange for a carriage to carry the big weapon, and as for the bolts used in it, she can manufacture them at her own place. Suddenly, Calm tells her that she should take at least a couple of bolts made by Mira, but she asks him why is that. Calm immediately takes out the sword Van made for her, and Mira asks why is it bent like that. Either way, she doesn't see anything special about the sword, and Calm asks her if she has a weapon that she doesn't mind breaking. Mira takes out her spare sword and tells Calm that she has used it for a long time because of its durability, and she is sure that he can't even chip it. However, she doesn't mind if it breaks, and with her permission, Calm swings his sword at her. Mira doesn't even feel much of an impact and wonders if Calm just grazed her sword, but the very next moment, her sword's top slides down cleanly. She can't believe this and asks what material the special sword is made of, to which Calm replies that it is made of ordinary iron, but since Van made it, it is this powerful. Van tells her that the bolts for the ballistae are made using the same method, and they easily pierced through armored lizards. Mira can barely believe this, but she immediately asks Van to give her some bolts as well. He is glad to add them as a bonus to their deal, and Mira thanks Calm for telling her this valuable secret, which he did just to rizz up the night mommy. Suddenly, Van hears someone screaming in the distance and finds that it is Ortho and his party, who are running towards the fortress frantically. They tell everyone to run for their lives because something disastrous is chasing after them. Within seconds, a huge dragon comes out from the woods, and everyone panics on seeing this. Ortho tells Van to take everyone back to the village while they distract the dragon, but he doesn't know if that is a good plan. He wants to help the adventurers but doesn't know if they can engage the dragon in a battle with the villagers scared to death. Luckily, Mira steps up and tells him that they should fight because the adventurers won't last long, and then the dragon will attack them. Van takes her advice and tells Ortho and gang to come towards the village so that they can shoot the dragon with their ballistae. Meanwhile, Mira takes charge of the situation and tells the villagers to get behind the ballistae while asking someone to take Art back to the village. Before that, Van goes to Art and apologizes for exposing her to this dangerous situation because they are fighting a mid-level dragon which is quite powerful. He assures her that with Mira leading them and their powerful weapons, they won't lose to the winged lizard, and Art wishes him the best. Van orders Till to take Art back to the village and tells her to summon D and his men on the way back. At the same time, Ortho's party is rushing towards the fortress gate, and Van tells everyone to aim for the dragon's wings first so that they can defeat it while it is on the ground. Suddenly, one of Ortho's friends trips and falls with the dragon close behind him. Fatty tries to distract the dragon towards himself by banging his shield, and when that doesn't work, he throws his dagger at the dragon, causing it to shift its focus to him. Fatty runs as fast as he can to escape the dragon while his party heads straight to the gate instead of helping him. He panics on seeing that everyone is abandoning him, but Ortho tells him that he is the fastest member of his group, so he can make it back alive. Van steps up to help Fatty before he becomes a snack for the dragon and tells the villagers to fire. The dragon easily dodges the bolts the villagers shoot towards it, and Van realizes that they are at a disadvantage. Suddenly, Mira tells everyone to leave immobilizing the dragon to her as she stands on the fortress wall, ready to attack. Van realizes that she is a top-tier elemental mage, which explains why she rose up to the title of a noble at such a young age. He looks forward to see what kind of magic she can use, and Mira creates a dense ball of fire that she shoots at the dragon. The dragon is not fast enough to dodge it, and the hit from Mira's attack causes it to crash to the ground. Everyone is astonished on witnessing Mira's firepower, but the dragon is not dead yet. As it gets back up, angrier than before, Van realizes that a dragon is much stronger than armored lizards, and they can't beat it at this rate. He orders everyone to fire at the dragon once it is airborne, but most of the bolts miss the dragon. Luckily, they manage to damage its wings, making it unable to fly, and Van thinks that the battle will be much easier now. However, the dragon is as fast and agile on its feet as it is on its wings, and it charges towards the fortress, dodging the second round of attack from the ballistae. Meanwhile, the adventurers have reached the gate, and once they go in, Van decides to close the gate. Suddenly, the dragon starts approaching him, and Mira immediately attacks it with her fire javelin. The dragon dodges it, but Mira curves her attack and makes it hit the monster from behind. That knocks the dragon to the ground again and creates a huge explosion, but it is not enough to defeat it. Mira jumps down and tells him that they need to head inside and prepare for a more intense battle there. Van follows her orders and tells the villagers to head back too. Meanwhile, the fire burns off the dragon's injured wings, and in its rage, it jumps on top of the fortress wall and crushes a ballista. Van wonders how it still has so much energy when suddenly Esparta starts walking towards the dragon. Van tells him to come back, but the old butler asks permission to stall the dragon for a bit before he returns. Esparta creates a giant rock wave over the dragon's head and then causes it to fall. The dragon suffers a concussion before being buried under the rocks, and Esparta casually walks back, telling Van that this will buy them enough time. Van tells the old Aura farmer to run instead of walking, but Esparta replies that he is old so he can't run. Calm decides to stay with him and asks Van to head back first. As Van goes towards the village gate, he realizes that they need to do something before the dragon regains its consciousness and attacks the village. He notices Mira standing on top of the village wall and decides to take her help. He tells her that he is going to cash in the favor she owes him now, and Mira is happy to hear that. Van tells her to pin the dragon to the ground as soon as it reaches the village, and then everyone can attack it with the old model ballistae. Mira agrees to his plan, and just then the dragon gets back up. Van thinks that they need more time to load the ballistae properly, and just then, Dee comes running there with his men. He charges straight at the dragon, telling Van not to worry about them because they have equipment made by him. Dee straight up attacks the dragon with his sword, but it blocks the attack and swings its tail to take him out. The other knights manage to block it somehow, but all three of them get knocked off their feet. The dragon is enraged at them now, but Esparta uses another gigantic earth wall to bury it. Dee orders his men to retreat, and the dragon quickly gets up from behind the rubble. Van thinks it is time to finish the battle now, and he tells Mira to attack. She immediately creates the most powerful fireball she can and hits the dragon with it, creating a gigantic explosion. Dee and his men barely avoid getting cooked by friendly fire, and on hearing the dragon scream in pain, Van orders the villagers to fire at it. The rain of powerful arrows brings the dragon down finally, but Dee goes in to double check just in case. The dragon turns out to be still alive, and with the last remaining bits of strength in its body, it lunges ahead to bite him. Dee dodges that attack by moving to the side, and then with his greatsword, he slashes off the dragon's head cleanly. Van announces that they have won, and the entire village starts cheering on him. Just then, Art and Till come to check up on him, and Mira arrives there too. She congratulates Van on slaying a dragon, and he replies that it was a close fight. She tells him that this is a great achievement nonetheless, because ordinary villages would be wiped off from the face of Earth if a dragon ever attacked them. She says that this village has heroes like Esparta and Dee, but more importantly, it has weapons powerful enough to pierce a dragon's scales. Van is still not satisfied with that, and he decides to upgrade the ballistae so that they can fire 10 consecutive rounds. Anyway, Mira tells Van that they need to hold a dragon slaying ceremony now because it is not a small thing to defeat a dragon. In fact, Dragon Slayer is the most honorable title a warrior can get, and in this battle, Dee has earned that title by finishing off the dragon. Soon, Van starts the ceremony to honor the people who contributed the most to the fight, and he lets Mira handle it because she knows it better. Mira tells the villagers that most villages and even cities would have been utterly destroyed if a dragon ever attacked them. But this village managed to defeat it with no casualties. She says that the most valuable contributors to this fight are Dee, the heroic knight who beheaded a dragon in one slash; Esparta, the genius mage who pinned the dragon down effortlessly; and Van, who made the weapons that brought the dragon down. As Mira sees Van being shy and happy about the praise he is receiving, she recalls how she has met people from all fields of life, but she has never seen anyone like him. Mira was born into a family of knights in the royal capital, but once her aptitude for fire magic was discovered, her family essentially sold her to the noble family that paid the most money. She trained rigorously and became a knight commander at the age of 16, after which she earned glory in various battles, earning the title of a viscountess. Then one day, Count Ferdinando summoned her to escort Art, who was to marry a noble in a far-off village. Mira thought this was overkill because this meeting could be an email. However, the Count, just like my manager, was insistent that Mira visit Van and his village in person. Mira told the nervous Art that if the boy they are going to meet turned out to be a dud, she would reject him for her, but the girl had other concerns. She asked Mira if she was being kicked out of her family because she is useless, and the mommy knight replied that all her siblings already have fiancés, so it is time for her to get one too. She developed a soft spot for Art, who was leaving her house at a young age just like her. Luckily, Van turned out to be the most amazing guy she had ever seen, and she is happy that Art is going to marry him. Suddenly, Mira steps forward and declares that she plans to form an alliance with Van. Everyone is shocked to hear this, and Mira tells Van that he is not receiving any support from his dad right now, so he can use the alliance to get support from her. On top of that, he won't have to worry about Count Ferdinando's army attacking him either. Mira tells Van that soon, the entire kingdom will know that they are close friends and no one will dare to mess with him. Van realizes this is a chance too good to miss, and he gladly accepts the offer to form an alliance with Mira. The next day, Van discusses their village's future with Esparta, who tells him that the strong fortress walls he built served their purpose in the battle against the wild dragon, and now he should shift his attention to village planning. Van agrees with him and recalls that Esparta wanted him to build a city that can house 10,000 people in the future. Esparta affirms and says that they should start looking for new residents to boost the population of their village and turn it into a city. Just then, Till enters the office to tell Van that the merchant brothers Bell and Rango have arrived along with other merchants from their company. Van gets excited to meet them and decides to sell the material from the forest dragon first, and then dive right into city planning. They go to the warehouse where the raw materials harvested from the dragon are kept, and Van asks the brothers how much money can he get for it. They tell him that a large forest dragon is quite rare and valuable, and on top of that, its scales, claws and eyes are in pretty good condition. They say that even with a conservative approach, he can get 100 platinum coins, which is enough to make him a millionaire even in the real world. Meanwhile, the senior merchants examine the carcass of the dragon carefully and then begin murmuring their strategy silently. Van approaches them and asks what they think, and they start rubbing their hands as they ask him to sell all of the dragon's parts to them because he can't find better business partners than them. They tell him that they will offer him the highest price he can get anywhere, and then say that he will get 60 platinum coins for everything. That is pretty low compared to what he learned from the brothers, and he decides to talk to them again before making his counter-statement. The senior merchants panic at this because the brothers are still not seasoned merchants like them and can make mistakes. They corner the brothers, telling them to play along because they are from the same company, and they should try to get as much profit as possible from this clueless brat. The brothers argue that they should provide a fair value as honest merchants, but the veterans tell them to take their honesty, roll it, and shove it up their ass. They are confident that no other merchant will come to this place, and Van will have no choice but to sell his items at the price they say. Van can hear them clearly, and he is about to speak up to the senior merchants, but the brothers beat him to it. They proudly declare that they plan to do honest business with everyone because they believe it will give them greater return in the long term, and they are sure that being honest with Van will be the best thing they can do. The senior merchants are not happy at this attitude, and they curse the noobs, threatening to expel them from the prestigious Merry Chamber of Commerce for not doing the best thing for the company. The two greedy bastards walk away with that, and Van asks the brothers if they will really be kicked out of the company. They affirm, believing that the higher-ups will probably side with the veteran merchants over new guys like them, and that means they are going to lose a lot of credibility. Van suggests them to start their own trading company instead, and both of them freak out on hearing that. They tell Van that starting a trading company is not easy, and they need to complete 3 big steps for that. First, they need to pay the Merchant Guild registration fee, and then they need to have a shop of their own. These are the easy parts, but the third part is getting an endorsement from a titled noble. Van knows only one noble with a title who can help him, and he immediately goes to mommy Mira with the request. She agrees to endorse the brothers without wasting any second, and Van asks her to think again because she might run into trouble with the Merry Chamber of Commerce that is backed by the royal family. Mira replies that a gigantic trading company will most probably not bother that a small-time noble is supporting a two-man company. On top of that, she wants to do things that will spread good things about her. And with this incident, she wants people to know how she helped two honest merchants start a company. Van quickly suggests that if she wants people to talk about her, she can take the credit for slaying the dragon because that way his family won't find it out either. Mira replies that slaying a dragon is a big thing, and people will investigate it independently to verify the claim. Their investigation will lead to Van and Dee, so he can't prevent his family from knowing that he was responsible for slaying the dragon. This hurts Van's hopes, and he fears that his family will summon him and hand over this village to someone else. Mira tells him that the only way to avoid that is by getting a title of his own. She explains that all nobles have a title that they can inherit or work hard to get. She claims that since she started from a knight, she had to take the longer route. But since Van is the son of a marquis, he can easily get the title of a baron from the king. Van doesn't understand how that can happen, and Mira tells him to claim the glory of slaying the dragon himself, because that is enough to get him a noble title. Van panics on hearing that because he doesn't want all the attention and clout, but Mira tells him that this is the only way. She can understand his worries as well, because when she first obtained a title, she also got many enemies, but she simply turned them to ash like the boss bitch she is. She tells Van to fire his ballistae at the enemies who try to harm him because that will definitely stop anyone from challenging him after that. Van doesn't know what to do with the most illegal but effective life hack he just learned. He asks Mira if she doesn't need the glory from defeating a dragon to get promoted. But she lets out her inner predator on hearing this and tells Van that she doesn't need a kid worrying about her. After that, Van goes back to the brothers and tells them that Mira is going to back them up. They are shocked to hear that, but that shock turns into happiness as they realize that they can open their own trading company. They immediately buy the dragon parts from Van for 130 platinum coins and then get ready to sell it in the capital. However, they run into a great trouble as they find that the senior merchants took away the carriages with them so that they are left helpless. The brothers are confused about what to do now, so Van offers to build a carriage for them. Just then, Mira also comes there and lends them her war horses, who are like Olympic-level athletes among other horses. Meanwhile, the two money-grubbing bastards are laughing that the brothers will come crying to them because they have no way to transport their items now, when suddenly, Mira overtakes them with the new carriage. The merchants take a second to process what they saw, and they realize that the brothers are going to form their own trading company with her support. Soon after that, Mira reaches the royal capital and appears before King Dino, who is pleased to see her and asks if she is here to request for another promotion. Mira tells him that she is here to ask for a noble title for her friend, and the king is curious to hear more. He asks why her friend is not here, and Mira replies that he is protecting a faraway village, so he cannot come here, but he has achieved great things which are just the starting of his journey. The king is intrigued on hearing Mira praise the guy so much, and he asks about his achievements and identity. Mira replies that the guy in question is Van, the youngest son of Marquis Ferdio, who defeated a forest dragon. The entire court starts buzzing with murmurs and gossips on hearing this, and the king immediately asks if he is a powerful elemental mage. Mira replies that Van has production magic, and he is just 8 years old right now. She then starts glazing Van, narrating how he found the village under attack the moment he arrived there, and he defeated the bandits with a handful of knights and adventurers with him. She also tells the king about how Van used his production magic to completely transform the rundown village into a fortress, before fighting a forest dragon and defeating it. The king finds that crap harder to believe than believing in Santa Claus as an adult, but Mira has brought a fang of the forest dragon as proof. She asks King Dino to come and see Van's village with his own eyes, because once he sees it, he will definitely promote Van and give him even more territory to rule. The king also likes the idea, and he grants Van the title of a baron. Mira announces that in public to get everyone talking about Van's achievements, wishing to see how interesting things get after this. Meanwhile, in the village, Van remodels the village houses and builds a few more of them to make it more full. He also builds 2 tall towers outside the village that serve as a proof of a big civilization, and also help to keep an eye out for threats. He decides to have lunch on top of the tower with his friends, and after that, they watch the village from high up. Esparta tells Van that they should start calling this a town instead of a village now, and he suggests the name Van Town for that. Van is pissed because he doesn't want his name to be used as a brand, but everyone thinks otherwise. After that, they have some cake that till baked since all the ingredients are now available in the shop set up by the brothers. Just then, Calm notices some people standing in front of the gate and Van decides to see who is visiting him now. As he opens the gate, he sees a group of dirty and starving people looking for the Cedo village. Van asks Esparta about that, and he replies that it was the original name of the village, even though it was not official. Van asks the poor people what they want, and they tell him that they belong to a nearby village and face heavy taxes while having no one to do work because their lord took their young people to join his army. They had heard that this village had changed a lot rapidly, so they came here, hoping to find some sort of relief. Van realizes that they are from Ferdinando County, which he doesn't have the best relations with. That is why he is hesitant about accepting them as refugees, but he doesn't want to abandon people who are so desperate either. He thinks about it a little, and then decides to accept them into his village. He asks them if they would like to become his citizens instead, and the leader of the group asks if he will really accept them because they have no money to pay taxes. Van tells them that they don't need to worry about taxes for a while, and he is going to make houses for them and keep them well fed. The villagers wonder if this is heaven on earth, and then Van asks them how many people live in their village. The leader replies that there are a total of 300 people in their village, and Van tells him that he will send some adventurers to escort everyone here. The leader gets emotional on hearing this and asks Van how can they ever repay his kindness. Van just acts humble and says that he will send some carriages as well to bring their luggage, but the village leader replies that they have cows that can transport everything. Van gets curious on hearing that, and the leader tells him that they have 10 cows in their village because they have huge pasture fields nearby. Van is really happy to hear that because with cows, they can start a dairy in his town, and he can enjoy all sorts of milk products. Soon after that, Ortho and his friends escort the neighboring villagers to Van Town, and they think how Van's decision makes no sense to them. The green-haired nerd baddie tells them to shut up and focus on their work, so they scatter and start comforting the villagers. Ortho picks a tired-looking woman, who says that she was against the decision of moving to another place that is even more remote than their village. Ortho agrees with her about the geography lesson, but then assures her that the village she is going to is a paradise. Soon, they arrive at the town, where Van has prepared a barbecue to welcome the tired and disheartened refugees. They can't believe that they get to eat something so delicious, and start stuffing their mouth with Van's delicious meat with tears in their eyes. After that, the refugees approach Van, asking if there is some work for them to do because they want to earn their living here. Van realizes that they are scared that he might kick them out for not working. He tells them that they can help by running stores he is setting up, and also by working on the fields. The villagers reply that they know how to work on a field, but they have never run a business before. Van tells them that they can leave the complicated stuff to the educated people and do whatever they can. Just then, the village chief arrives there to welcome the guests and says that Van has made their life much better, and now they want their new friends to enjoy that life too. The villagers are already overwhelmed by this, but Van is not done yet. He has prepared cake for them using the milk they got from their cows. He tells the new residents that their lives are only going to get better as he develops the village into a town and then a city, and everyone feels that they can finally live after just surviving all this time. Soon after that, all the residents of Van's town start mingling with each other. As he observes the people from the two villages and the mermaid clan becoming friends, he is pleased with his progress, and Esparta tells him that he did great. The old butler then abruptly tells Van that it is time to resume his education, and Van panics, saying that it is unreasonable to start studying just after finishing work. Esparta tells him that no one has ever died from studying too much, and he better get his back in the classroom. Van feels that he is going to suffer, but luckily, Ortho and his team arrive there just then. Van is excited to see them and asks if their hunt was a success, but Ortho looks sad as he apologizes to him about discovering the entrance to the dungeon. It takes Van a few moments to recall that they were actively trying not to discover the dungeon entrance, but he doesn't understand why it is a big deal when they can just ignore it. Esparta, however, tells him that now that they have discovered the dungeon, he needs to report it to the king immediately because that is the law. Van realizes that his small town is not yet ready to accept thousands of adventurers who will come here to explore the dungeon. And on top of that, his father will learn about all the development work that has happened here. Ortho still feels bad about it, but Van tells him to chill because they can't change what has happened. He orders Mr. Horizontally Gifted, Kuzala, to go to the capital by himself to report the dungeon to the king, because he must have discovered it since he is the party scout. Ortho suggests that they should also go with Kuzala for moral support, but Van asks him and the mage Pluriel to explore the area around the dungeon entrance. They agree to that job for the reward of 1 large gold coin and leave Fatty on his own, but he gets an even better reward than them. Van gives him a sword made of mithril as his reward, and suddenly, both Ortho and Pluriel want to go with him. Anyway, Kusala leaves for the capital, staring at the mithril sword the entire time. He feels lucky that he got such an amazing reward when suddenly, he comes across a carriage that has been wrecked by a bunch of orcs. Kusala decides to face them head on, confident that with a mithril short sword, he will easily defeat them. He charges ahead and easily outpaces the orcs, and the mithril sword slashes through them cleanly. Kusala finishes the entire group of monsters in minutes, and just after that, a pretty girl named Flameria comes there to thank him for saving her life. She starts buttering up Fatty, saying that he must be a famous hero judging by his skill and style, but he replies that he is just an adventurer who is not even famous yet. Kusala doesn't know how to respond, and then Flameria tells him that she is going to walk to the royal capital now, and if he ever comes there, she would surely repay him. Kusala replies that he is also going in the same direction, so she should hop on his horse, but Flameria doesn't want to trouble him. Fatty doesn't really care about that, and he puts her on his horse immediately, saying that he can protect her on the way this way. He then asks the girl why is she going to the capital, and she gloomily replies that her father was a baron, but he died in a battle and his territory was conquered by the enemy. So now she is homeless, so she wants to become a maid at a noble's household in the capital, or a popular OnlyFans model. Kusala has zero delicacy, and he replies that Flameria is also free like him, and she should consider coming with him to the remote village where he lives, because there will certainly be work for her there. Fatty decides to risk it all for the huzz and tells Flameria that he will protect her if she comes with him, and she puts on a sad smile as she accepts his offer. Back in the village, Van tells Esparta that he will create a separate settlement for the adventurers that will come to their place shortly. Esparta likes the idea and suggests him to appoint a governor to manage that place. Van immediately appoints him as the governor, and then Esparta recommends him to form a knight order to maintain law and order in the village and the new settlement. Van replies that he will form the Cedo Knight Order under D to protect the village, and then the Esparta Knight Order to manage the adventurers. Soon after that, he starts working on creating the adventurer outpost outside the village and D, and the villagers start gathering materials for him. Van gets an idea and asks D to recruit the villagers into his knight order, but both of them are shocked to learn that the shrewd old butler beat them to the game and already recruited every healthy adult to join his squad. As Van is despairing about losing to the old man, Calm tells him that Kusala is back, and he has brought a surprise guest with him. Van welcomes Kusala, who cheerfully informs him that he filed the report about the new dungeon in the capital. Van asks him who is the lady with him, and Fatty replies that she had nowhere to go, so he brought her along. Van welcomes Flameria too, who says that Kusala saved her from orcs near the capital and starts praising him, calling him a true hero. Van can see the very obvious romantic tension between the two, and he is happy that at least someone found their soulmate. Suddenly, he spots a bunch of rowdy delinquents riding towards them aggressively, and he craps his pants, thinking that they are bandits who are trying to rob them. Fatty tells him to chill because these guys are just a bunch of overeager adventurers who rushed after him the moment they learned that a new dungeon had been discovered. The rowdy adventurers soon reach them and begin telling Van and others to head back inside their village because a place like this is dangerous. Van is initially stunned and thinks that they are definitely bad people, but then Calm tells him that these people might be idiots straight out of the Mad Max series, who don't know the correct way to say things, but they are indeed worried about them. Flameria remarks that they look scary, and that statement hits the adventurers harder than a hammer to the nuts, and they repeat that kids like them should not be out here in danger. Van tells them that they are quite close to the village, so they are not in any real danger. The Mad Max crew can't believe that a remote village can have such huge walls and ask Van how he built them. He decides to show them instead of telling them, and uses some wood blocks to create a temporary fencing, and the adventurers grab their heads in shock on seeing such amazing magic. Just then, D arrives there with more raw material, and as soon as he takes Van's name, the adventurers are shocked to learn that the famous Van Nefertio is just a brat. D gets mad at the Mohawk crew for calling Van a brat, and as he slashes through their sword with ease, they immediately start fearing and respecting him. From that day onwards, they always bow down when they see D, but whenever he is not around, they gather around Van to learn how a kid can manage such a huge village. A couple days later, Ortho and his party return from their mission, and they are shocked to see more adventurers in the town. Before Van can ask them what they found, Kusala comes there with his new girlfriend, and as they greet the party before heading to their room, everyone is stunned. No one can believe that Fatty would be the first one to bag a baddie out of them. and when Van says he will build a house for the two of them, Ortho regrets sending Kusala alone to the capital. Van ignores the moping single loser and asks Pluriel what they found. She reveals that there are no monsters around the dungeon entrance, but it is located in a canyon which is hard to access. She says that the place is not suitable for any big construction. But things can be different if Van goes there and builds something himself. Van realizes her intentions, but he doesn't want to leave his peaceful village life and go to the dungeon to build stuff. He tells Pluriel that since he is a kid, he has a curfew and needs to be back home early, but she replies that they will get permission from Esparta and make sure to protect him. Van refuses to give up either and decides to make some demands that she won't be able to fulfill. He says that he wants desserts and a nap on the way to the dungeon. He also wants to bring Till and Calm with him, as well as Art, who doesn't have any abilities to defend herself. Van adds that Dee and Esparta can't come along because they have to focus on building the city and they will need a lot of people to escort them. Van is proud of his unreasonable requests and thinks that Pluriel won't be able to meet them. However, she happily agrees and tells him that they will head out tomorrow. Van is completely dumbfounded as Pluriel walks away, telling the depressed Ortho to get up and find people to guard Van on their quest tomorrow. The next day, Van rides a carriage to the dungeon, and he still doesn't like the idea. Calm, who is also with him, hates it even further because of the motion sickness, and he looks like he will hold a grudge against Van for suggesting this. Suddenly, a giant troll appears before them, and the Mohawk crew charge at it without wasting a second. They take it down quickly and Van is impressed by that, but he is annoyed by their constant shouting and screaming. Meanwhile, Art is enjoying the change in scenery with Till by her side and Van is pleased to see that. Just then, Ortho informs him that they are almost at the dungeon entrance and Van peeks outside the window to take a look. He freaks out at what he sees and orders the carriage to stop immediately because they have to cross a wide canyon to get to the dungeon. And the only thing that leads them there is a pair of wooden logs, and one of the delinquents is doing ballet on top of it. Van freaks out on seeing that, but then he sees Ortho and Kusala standing nonchalantly on the second log, asking if something is the matter. Van realizes that the adventurers have no idea what the OSHA guidelines are, and he will have to teach them from the basics. He immediately orders everyone to sit down and think about minimizing risk because there are places where a single mistake can cost them their life. The Mohawk crew doesn't understand this, and even Kusala doesn't care about that as he happily dances on the logs. He is confident that nothing will happen because he trusts himself, but Van says that if he kicks the log, he will surely fall to his death. Kusala freaks out on that, and then Van tells everyone that even if they are quite skilled, there can be accidents if the log rolls or cracks. That is why they need to be more careful. The adventurers agree and say that they will walk more carefully now, but Van has a better idea. He uses his abilities to create a sturdy bridge, taking them to the other side where the entrance of the dungeon lies. He asks the Mohawk crew what kind of buildings they want in this place, and their ideas include a casino and a Disneyland. Van realizes that he was an idiot to even ask that question from them, and he decides to build what he thinks is more important. He starts by building a sturdy steel door to prevent monsters from coming out of the dungeon in any case. Next, he creates a huge hostel for the adventurers to stay so that they can go into the dungeon more frequently. The Mohawk crew immediately rushes inside to check the building, and Till says that the first place has the storeroom and general resting area. The second floor has a cafeteria, and the third floor is the sleeping area. There is also a spacious balcony from where the adventurers can see the beautiful view of nature, and the Mohawk crew is really amazed by everything. Everyone praises Van for taking care of everything that the adventurers might need, and he adds that he even built some tanks to catch rainwater for washing and cleaning. He tells the Mohawk crew that they can't use it to drink, and they don't really get the point of that, but they still agree to his command. After that, Van tells Ortho that he is in charge of the situation, and he is not mentally ready to handle a bunch of delinquents. Anyway, Van realizes that the sun is setting, and he tells everyone that they need to head home in time for his curfew or Esparta will scold him. The adventurers laugh that even Van is afraid of something because he is a kid and he is pissed at them. Just then, Art calls for his attention and asks what is the glowing crystal that she just found. Van is shocked to see that it is a huge crystal of pure mithril, and he praises Art for discovering it. With that, everyone returns to the village where Esparta is waiting for Van with a creepy smile on his face. Just as Van sees that, he realizes that he is screwed and he turns to his friends for help. Till, Calm, and Art are terrified of Esparta and don't know if they can do anything to help. So Van turns to Ortho, asking him to save him because he got late while helping the adventurers. Ortho reluctantly steps up to take the blame for being late, and Van thinks that he won't be lectured now. However, Esparta tells Ortho to shut up and move aside as he drags Van inside for a lecture. Soon after that, Van takes Art on a walk through the village, and she remarks that it has changed completely under him. She says that everyone must feel happy to live in a place like this, and Van asks what she feels. Art doesn't understand his question at first, so Van asks if she wants to stay here. Art reacts a bit timidly on hearing that, and Van tells her not to stress about it. He claims that they don't need to think about their engagement, and he just wants to know what she wants. Art thinks out aloud about what she wants, and that is indeed an engagement with Van. He goes blank as he hears that, and once Art starts acting super embarrassed, he tells her that he will forget that she said that. However, he can't hide his happiness on learning that this cutie is down bad for him, which is creepy since he is a grown-ass adult on the inside. A couple days later, the merchant brothers Belle and Rango return to the village. Van asks them if they succeeded in setting up their trade company, and they affirm, saying that it is all thanks to him. They also give him the payment for the wild dragon's materials, and Van casually hands it over to Till, who starts vibrating because this is the first time she is handling such a huge amount of money. Van then asks the brothers if Mira did not return to the village along with them, and the brothers tell him that she went to talk to Count Ferdinando after recommending them to the merchant guild. They say that Mira feels that staying with Van will be more interesting and rewarding than staying with Count Ferdinando, and Van is taken aback on learning that the badass mommy is going to stay in his village from now on. However, the brothers burst his bubble by telling him that she just plans to get a territory of her own near Van's village, and Calm is sure that she will get it pretty quickly. After that, the merchant brothers tell Van that they have got an even better thing for him. They pull out a huge wooden box from the carriage and place it before him, saying that this is what he was looking for. They open the box to reveal a machine bow that can fire 10 arrows in a row, and Van screams in joy because this is exactly what he needed to build a brand new ballisti. He immediately takes the machine crossbow back to his mansion and begins reverse engineering it. Art remarks that he looks happier about getting the crossbow than he is about getting a handful of platinum coins, and he affirms, once he figures out how the crossbow works, he uses his abilities on a block of nanomaterial to turn it into a crossbow. Art is impressed by it, but when Van can't fire the crossbow, she remarks that even he fails sometimes. Van doesn't understand the intention behind that statement, but Art panics, thinking that he got offended. He laughs at her worries and tells her that he fails all the time, and apart from his production magic, there is nothing special about him. Art tells him that it is not true because he is smart, well-educated, and talented in swordsmanship. As opposed to him, she has nothing good going for her. Van replies that he doesn't have any talent, and if she wants, he can let her study under a Sparta ND because they will make her as talented as him in no time. Art chuckles at the offer, but then Van asks about her magic aptitude, and her smile immediately vanishes from her face. Till assures her that she doesn't have to answer the question if she is not comfortable, but despite her trembling voice, Art reveals that she has an aptitude for marionette magic. Both Till and Van are shocked at this, because marionette magic is considered useless by nobles, and it is as hated as production magic. However, Van cannot let his future waifu be depressed, and he tells her that her magic sounds exciting, and he really wants to see it. She hesitates because she doesn't think he will like her, but Van says that people who can use marionette magic are rare, and she is the only person he knows who can use it. With Van pushing her, Art agrees to show her abilities using a doll that Van makes for her. She activates her power and uses it to make the doll dance, and Van is so impressed by it that he excitedly grabs her hands, saying that her magic has limitless potential. Till also praises her and suggests that they should make a lot more dolls so that Art can make them dance in front of the villagers, who will surely like it. Art is not sure about it because she believes that her magic is not fit to be shown to other people. Van replies that people say the same thing for his production magic, and his own father called him a failure, but he used that magic to bring happiness to his people. He tells her to believe in herself, and Art says that she will believe in his words and do her best. That night, Van summons all the villagers and adventurers to a newly built stage in the village center. Everyone is curious about why they are gathered here, and Van arrives on the stage to answer their questions himself. He tells them that tonight they are going to put on a show using Art's magic, and everyone is really intrigued. Art takes a deep breath to calm herself, and then uses her magic to make a life-sized puppet stand. Everyone is amazed by that, but some people recognize her marionette magic and claim that this is the cursed magic that was used by someone to attack the king and nobles in the past. Art freezes on hearing all that, and people start talking more about her magic, which makes her even more nervous. Van realizes that and quickly intervenes, telling people to be patient, and then giving a reassuring glance to Art. She remembers all the happy moments they have spent together and uses them as an inspiration to make the puppet dance. The crowd is mesmerized on seeing the puppet dance gracefully, and they remain speechless even as Art's performance ends. She bows before the crowd anxiously, and they suddenly burst into applause and cheers. Art can't believe that her magic is receiving so much love now, and as Van comes to congratulate her, she hugs him tightly and starts crying while thanking him. The next day, Calm rushes into Van's office with urgent news about a carriage with the crest of the royal family standing at their gate. Van rushes to the gate to find a whole caravan waiting there along with Mira. As Art greets Mira cheerfully, she is shocked and asks Van what did he do to change Art so much in such a short time. He replies that she was not confident in her abilities till now and he just made her see how wonderful they were. Mira is impressed by this, but then she suddenly remembers what she is really here for. She tells Van to kneel down before the king of their country. Van obeys the command immediately, and just then, King Dino arrives there and tells him that he has become a noble, and from now on, he must dedicate himself to serving the nation. Van affirms formally, and the king tells him that he expects great things from him. He then brings up the dungeon that Van discovered within his territory and says that soon, an official team will be sent to gather more information about it. After that, the king moves on to the topic of Van slaying the forest dragon and says that it is an amazing feat, but they need to verify it thoroughly. His advisor tells Van that the king is here to verify the claim himself, and tells him to answer all questions honestly. Van promises the king that he will answer his questions honestly, but in return, he asks him to keep an open mind because he might not believe the things he hears. The king is interested in him now and promises to be open-minded. After that, Van takes the king and his party inside his village and gives him a tour of all the things that he has built to keep his people safe. He tells the king in detail about the wall, the trenches, and the ballistae. The king asks his advisor Aperta what he thinks about it, and the advisor replies that ballistae are a useful weapon, but they are quite inconvenient to use. Van replies that he can give them a demo, and immediately orders Calm to fire a shot into the forest. Calm immediately obeys and fires a bolt into the forest, causing a massive explosion. Both the king and his advisor are blown away by that, and they claim that the ballistae rivals the power of an archmage. They are also curious about the star-shaped fortress wall, and Van explains that because of the unique shape, they can attack enemies from all sides. The advisor's eyes widen in horror as he realizes the fate of enemies that will be attacked from all sides by the ballistae. Mira says that Van's fortress is perfectly suited to stop any aerial assault, but he replies that he is not sure about how the ballistae will work on flying enemies, even though he has made many of them. Aperta asks Van if he made the ballistae himself, and he affirms. The king gets serious on hearing that and warns Van that he won't tolerate any lies, and he replies that he is not lying. Even Mira supports him, asking the king to believe Van because he has more things that will leave him completely dumbfounded. The advisor then asks Van who came up with a design for the ballistae, and he replies that he came up with all that. Next, he asks Van about the development of the village that would normally take several years, and Van replies that he worked really hard to build all of it, with everyone helping him to gather materials. Van says that he built all the walls around his territory in 4 months, and the king and his advisor can't believe it. Mira tells them that they should just see a demo to believe Van's claims, and he gladly asks them to accompany him to the lake. They walk through the village and everyone greets Van while completely ignoring the king. The advisor asks Van if he has casual conversations like this with his people all the time, and he affirms, leaving him in shock once again. On the way, they run into some of the Mohawk crew, and the king and his advisor are completely bamboozled on learning that Van is friends with delinquents like them too. After that, they finally arrive at the lake, but to their shock, it is full of mermaids. The king's eyes widen in shock on seeing such a rare species in Van's backyard. Suddenly, Van asks Esparta to create an earthen wall, and the old butler obeys his command, creating a huge wall in an instant. Van then touches the wall to deliver the finishing touch, and it turns into a reinforced concrete wall in an instant. The king's jaw drops halfway to the floor on seeing this, but there are more shocking things waiting for him. Van takes him to the common area of the mermaids, where the mermaid chief asks him about the king. Van says that he is his boss, and the mermaid chief decides to pay him his sincere respect. He immediately goes to greet the king and presents him a gift to commemorate their friendship. Another mermaid presents him with a glowing red stone that Van picks up, and Mira is the first to realize what it is. The advisor recognizes it just 1 second later, and he freaks out because it is orichalcum, which is called the metal of gods because of how rare and valuable it is. He says that if they make a sword with this block of orichalcum, it will cost 100 platinum coins just to forge it, but the king tells him to stop being a miser because an orichalcum sword would automatically be a national treasure. In the meantime, Van turns the block into a sword, but when the king notices it, he hides the sword behind his back. The king asks him if he can make swords using his power too, and he tries to evade the question, but Mira tells him to be honest. The king promises to reward him whatever he wants, and Van asks for permanent residency in the village, no matter what happens. The king asks him why he wants to stay in the village when he can come to the capital and become really successful. But Van replies that he has to stay here to protect the people and the village he has worked so hard to build. The king can't say no to that after he promised to give Van whatever he wanted. He says that it is a shame to leave Van in such a remote region, but he still wants him to work with them whenever possible. Van promises that he will do as much as he can for the country, and he is glad that he can live a peaceful life in the village. After that, the king asks Van to take him to the dungeon next because he wants to verify it himself since he came all the way here. Van replies that going to the dungeon and coming back will take some time, so he should do it another day, and the king is not pleased with his attitude that is becoming increasingly casual. Suddenly, some villagers come screaming and tell Van that a dragon has attacked them. He immediately orders everyone to get behind the ballistae and asks Mira to help them as well, when suddenly, a huge flying dragon comes right on top of the village. Mira is the first one to correct the men around her by telling them that it is not a dragon but a wyvern. King Dino immediately turns to his advisor Aperta and asks what he thinks about the situation. Aperta replies that wyverns are pack animals and they don't fly solo usually, and it is very rare for a solo wyvern to attack a village. He then notices a robed mage sitting on top of the wyvern and deduces that this is an enemy attack, and there can be more threats lurking nearby. The king is pretty sure that the enemy kingdom of Yeleneta is behind this, and he warns Van to be careful because more enemies might attack them at any time. Van mentally prepares himself for a battle, but as he looks at the wyvern, he finds that it is out of the range of his ballistae, and right now, the only option he has against a flying enemy is the prototype he is working on. At the same time, the 8th prince of the Yeleneta kingdom, Animag, is heading towards the village with a bunch of knights who keep updating him about the progress their wyvern is making. Animag doesn't want to hear anything because he is pissed that a prince like him is being sent on a mission to destroy a nameless village in the middle of nowhere. One knight steps up to kiss his ass and tells the arrogant prince that their kingdom has long been at bad terms with the neighboring kingdom of Scuderia, and now it is time to settle things once and for all. The emperor has assigned him the role of leading their vanguard and capturing this village that will serve as their foothold into Scuderia. Animag starts acting smug on hearing this and tells the knights that conquering a tiny village will be really easy, but once he reaches the Cedo village, he is stunned on seeing a fortress before him. The knights start panicking because they never expected to see a fortress in such a remote area, but Animag tells them to shut their peasant mouths. He says that there is no way someone can create a fortress so quickly in a remote area, so this must just be a decoy made to look like the real deal. He declares that they will charge ahead and conquer the village by ignoring the fake fortress, but his knights ask him what if it is real. Animag tells him to shut up because the fortress is clearly AI and orders them to destroy it immediately. His knights have no option but to obey him, and they start hitting the door of the fortress with a battering ram. However, after 3 strokes, which is honestly more than average, the knights get tired and there is just a tiny dent on the door. Animag can't believe this, and then Van appears on the top of the wall to greet him. He introduces himself as the lord of the village and asks the prince what business brought him here all the way from Yeleneta kingdom. Animag is taken aback that Van knows they are from Yeleneta kingdom, but Van was just bluffing to see if his guess was right. The douchebag prince can't believe that, and he demands Van to come down and face him. He tells his knight to order their wyvern to attack the village, and the knight replies that it is just a scouting wyvern and not really trained for combat. Animag tells him to shut up because wyverns are dragons and dragons are strong even without training. He tells Van to be ready to get his ass whooped by a dragon, and in response Van cues Mira to launch the prototype. She gives the signal to fire a new type of ballista arrow high up in the air, missing the wyvern on purpose. Suddenly, the arrowhead explodes, raining down hundreds of sharp blades on the wyvern, causing it to plummet to the ground. Animag falls to the ground as a result of the impact, and he is aghast on seeing such a strange and powerful weapon. Van cheerfully tells him that he created a lot of lightweight but sharp shurikens and then stuffed them in a bomb to take out flying enemies. He says that it was the first time they used this prototype, but it is looking good. And just then, the king and Aperta come there to see the damage firsthand. Animag recognizes the king and asks what the hell is he doing here. But the king is too busy aura-farming to reply to him. Van then asks Animag if he still wants to fight, and his knights immediately drop to their knees and surrender. The stupid prince, however, has not given up yet, and he orders the knights to keep fighting. To silence him, Mira throws a ballista arrow right between his legs, causing him to give up as well. The king is impressed by Van's abilities, and he says that Count Ferdio has produced a brilliant son. Aperta tells him that the count kicked out Van from his house because he thought he was useless, and the king feels that they need to reevaluate the magic aptitudes from now on. Later, Animag is taken to a dark and damp prison cell, where Mira and Aperta take up the responsibility of interrogating him. Aperta plays the good cop and asks Animag nicely to reveal his strategy. However, when he refuses to talk, Aperta hands over the task to Mira, who is ready to pluck his nails out one by one till he talks. Animag is terrified of the Night Mommy, and he agrees to spill the beans. He reveals that the Yeleneta Kingdom has been planning to attack Scuderia for years now, and they were going to start it from this remote village, but it was much more difficult than they thought. Mira asks him if they were planning to attack other villages too, and Animag replies that their main forces are already marching towards the city of Skudit, because that was their main target. Mira and Aperta panic on hearing that and immediately inform the king of the emergency. Aperta says that they should head back to the capital and lead a strong army to defend Skudit, and the king completely agrees. He requests Van to join them in the battle as well, and that takes the little genius by surprise. Normally, he couldn't refuse a request from the king, but he decides to be bold this time since he doesn't want to leave the village. He says that the village is still under development, and if he leaves it now, it would be abandoning it. The king asks if he can call a village that can hunt dragons underdeveloped, and Van affirms, saying that he has much bigger plans for it. Mira laughs at his audacity and ambition, but then tells him that he should accept the king's request, because it is a noble's duty to help the kingdom in times of need. Van agrees to do that, but he asks the king to at least let him assemble his troops himself. The king grants him permission, and Van quickly summons all his trusted people to his mansion. He tells Esparta to protect the village as its acting lord, because only he has the abilities and qualifications to do so. Next, he asks Dee and his knights to come along, but tells Till and Calm to stay behind because it can be dangerous. They insist on coming along at any cost, and Van can't convince them otherwise. He begins to wonder if the size of his troops isn't a bit too small, but Dee assures him that they are stronger than an entire squad of knights. Suddenly, Ortho and his party arrive there and offer to act as Van's bodyguards during this battle, even though they won't directly take part in the war. Van is really happy to hear that and tells them to ask the other adventurers to join them as well, offering them payment of 15 gold coins for risking their lives to protect him. He then asks Kuzala to be their scout because there is no one else in their village who is as fast and nimble as him. After that, Mira tells Van that she will report all this to Count Ferdinando first, and then bring all her troops to defend Skudit. She asks him what weapons he will take with him, and Van doesn't know the answer to that. He thinks that his ballistae are still incomplete and he can't use them in war. But then Art volunteers to bring the mithril puppet he made for her. Soon after that, Van assembles his full force outside the village and tells them that they are going to fight the Knights of Yeleneta Kingdom, who are more experienced and better trained than them. However, he assures them that their main goal is to return alive from the battlefield, and he is sure that if they work together, they will all be safe and defend the city of Skudit. At the same time, the news about the enemy invasion reaches Jalpa, Van's father. He is shocked to hear about it, and tells his butler to immediately rally their knights for battle. He also tells him to ask the neighboring lords for support, and the butler suggests asking Van for help, since his village is quite close to Skudit. Jalpa scoffs at the idea, saying that Van's village doesn't even have enough food to feed themselves, so they won't have any soldiers. The butler tells him that the merchants returning from the capital are claiming that Van has been made a baron for defeating a dragon. Jalpa calls that fake news because no one without elemental magic can defeat a dragon. The butler still insists that Van must have done something extraordinary, but Jalpa doesn't want to hear anything more. He rides out to Skudit immediately with his troops, but by the time he reaches there, he finds that it has been captured, and their southern gate has been completely demolished by the Wyvern squad. He tells his soldiers to regroup with the forces stationed in the city when the Yeleneta Kingdom Wyverns notice them and start dropping bombs on them, wiping out most of their soldiers. Jalpa panics, thinking that this is the end for him, when suddenly, the Wyverns retreat without finishing him off. He wonders what is going on, unaware that something unforeseen is happening at the western gate of the city. The Wyverns patrolling the area are slashed down by the mithril puppet that Art is controlling remotely, And for her, the life and death of the enemy soldiers is just like a VR video game. Van is amazed at her abilities because she is fighting the wyverns from outside the city. He still can't believe that Skudit fell so quickly, and Ortho replies that it must be because of the wyvern squad dropping bombs from air. Dee says that even if the troops from the capital arrive here now, they won't be able to do much since Skudit has already fallen. Van decides to help them retreat safely by distracting the enemies and asks Art to keep attacking the wyverns. Suddenly, a bunch of enemy knights locate them and charge towards them. Calm quickly takes out a bunch of them with the machine gun crossbow, while Dee and his troops also join the fight. The enemy archers aim to attack them from a distance, but Kuzala, Ortho, and Pluriel take them out. This pushes the enemy knights to an edge, and they decide to crush Van's troops with their full force. As soon as Van notices that, he orders everyone to retreat. Ortho tells him that they can win this fight, so they shouldn't retreat now. But Van reminds him that their main goal was to stay alive and return home in one piece. He says that he won't be happy with a victory if someone dies, and they can always rejoin the fight later. Soon after that, Jalpa and his troops return to his city. He feels lucky to survive the attack of the wyverns, but his men have lost all hope after the aerial assault. Just then, his eldest son Mersha arrives there, and Jalpa starts yelling at him, asking why was he so late. Mersha apologizes, but just then, the king arrives there and tells Jalpa to seek therapy instead of taking out his anger issues on his son. Both Jalpa and Mersha fall to their knees, and the king asks them about the situation at Skudit. Jalpa replies that Skudit has fallen because of the wyvern troops and the new weapon of the Yeleneta army, and they barely escaped with their lives because the wyverns went towards the west gate. The king says that it must be because of Van's troops, and Jalpa can't believe that. Aperta tells him that Van has developed the remote village into a fortress and even defeated a dragon, and Jalpa yells that Van can't do it because he is not an elemental mage. Aperta asks him if he is calling the king's advisor a liar, forcing him to shut up. Just then, the king notices Mersha clenching his fist on hearing that Van is now a baron, and he asks him if he is jealous that his little brother got promoted before him. Mersha starts crying and says that he is really proud of his little brother. Later that night, Van and his troops are resting in the forest, exhausted by the battle earlier. Dee asks Van what is their plan now, and he doesn't have any idea. He wants to go home because he has already done his duty as a noble, but he understands that leaving Skudit occupied is not a good idea, and they must do something about it. Art tells him that she is terrified of stepping into the war zone again, because even innocent people are sacrificed there. Van agrees with her, but he still wants to do just enough so that no one can complain to him later. He suddenly gets an idea and declares that he will make and supply some catapults to the army, after which they can all go home in peace. He immediately creates a catapult to show to his friends, and they remark that it is pretty big, so transporting it won't be easy. Van thinks about it for a bit and says that he can just create them on the site, and then calls for a strategy meeting for tomorrow. However, the next morning, Van regrets his enthusiasm last night because now he has to deliver the new weapons himself, and for that, he needs to go back to the war zone. He keeps whining about it, while his subordinates are confident that their new weapon will help them win the war. They soon reach the city nearest to Skudit, and Van notices that everything is normal, but there seem to be a lot of soldiers around. Dee tells him that after their defeat at Skudit, their soldiers are using this place as a base to rebuild their strength. Just then, a group of familiar-looking knights block Van's way, and leading them is his father Jalpa, who looks down at Van with disdain in his eyes. Van greets his father, who immediately asks if he has been made a baron after hunting a dragon. Van affirms, saying that it was just your regular forest dragon, but just the name of the monster is enough to make the knights crap their pants. Jalpa asks Van how did he do that, because even a genius elemental mage like him can't defeat such a monster by himself. Van tells him that it is just skill issue, and then reveals that he used his ballisti to hunt down the forest dragon. Jalpa gets furious on hearing this because he can't believe it, and even his soldiers don't think it is possible. Van already knows that his dad is an asshole, so he can't win a debate against him. While he is wondering what to do, Mira comes there to see Van and tells him that the king is here too. He is looking forward to any new weapons that Van has made. Van is glad to have her here, and he suddenly gets an idea. He asks his dad if he would like to see his ballista. After he shows the new weapon to the king, and Mira supports the idea. She tells Jalpa that if he has some spare ammo, She can show him the ballista that she has brought along, but Van tells her that he has already upgraded the design till then. Mommy Mira starts talking business with Van while Jalpa watches them with disgust and disbelief. Soon after that, all three of them go to visit the king, and Van is impressed by how intense and badass the king's guards look. Mira tells him that they are all very strong warriors, but then feels necessary to create beef between them. She says that Van could beat them with his equipment, and the guards don't like that statement. Van gets embarrassed on hearing that, but Mira just laughs and leads him to the king, who holds a meeting with all the nobles in the region to retake Skudit. Van notices that Art's father, Count Ferdinando, is there too, and he doesn't know how to approach him later. The king asks Aperta if there is anything they should be extra careful about, and he immediately starts yapping about how the kingdom of Yelaneta has always failed to conquer Skudit till now. This time, they did it within a day by using the Wyvern Squad and the black ball weapons that blew up everything around them. Van realizes that these uncultured people don't even know what a bomb is yet, and they can't do anything unless they have a way to counter the bombs. The king realizes this too, and he is quite depressed about it, but not as depressed as Jalpa, who lost a great amount of soldiers to the bombing. Aperta turns to Van, asking if he has come up with a strategy, and Van replies that they just need to defeat the wyverns before they can drop the bombs, and then victory will be easy. The other nobles mock Van, telling him to go back to preschool and use his imagination there. But the king and his advisor believe that Van might be able to solve their problems. King Dino asks Van to go to the front lines and lead the operation to retake Skudit, but Van does a hard pass on that, shocking everyone. They can't believe that a kid dares talk back to the king, but the king is more surprised that Van doesn't want the glory that comes with fighting on the front lines. Van casually replies that he is not a DPS, but a support, and more importantly, he doesn't want to get hurt. The other nobles start yelling at him for being selfish, and they even begin calling out Jalpa for raising a coward. Jalpa gets furious at this and tells Van that he is way out of line right now because he is just the lord of a small nameless village and he can't talk to the king like that. Van tells him that none of the nobles here know what it's like to defend a small powerless village, and just then, the king intervenes. He tells Van to continue, but instead of telling his strategy, he starts talking about his struggles in protecting a small village without any help from his family. He says that he made the village much stronger than before, but it is still small and will easily fall if the Yelaneta kingdom attacks it. One noble asks why would the enemy kingdom bother to attack a tiny village in the middle of nowhere, and Aperta replies that they have many reasons to do that. For starters, they sent a prince to conquer the village because they are serious about invading the Scuderia kingdom this time, and they will try to capture it again. Everyone gets tense on hearing this, and Van says that he wants to protect the village that he built with his friends, so he can't afford to get injured here. Count Ferdinando tells Van that he understands his situation, but asks if he thinks he can fend against the Yelaneta army, even if he is at his village. Van confidently affirms, but the nobles can't believe this. Van tells the king that he is still going to help them win the battle, even though he wants to stay in the support role. He says that he will supply the Scuderia army with ballistae and catapults in exchange of being sent back to his village, and the king has no issue with that. Van says that he will make them immediately, and Jalpa asks if he is even serious about this war, because if he starts now, he won't finish in time. Van remains calm and says that it will be better if he sees things with his own eyes. He takes everyone outside and creates a ballista and catapult as a demo, and this leaves the nobles dumbfounded. Van asks his dad what he thinks about it, and he coldly remarks that this is just a dummy weapon which won't fire, so he is not interested. He goes back to organize his army, but the rest of the nobles stick around to see the demo to the end. Van tells them that the catapult is designed to launch shuriken that bring down wyverns, and the king asks if he is sure that it can defeat the enemy. Van replies that unless the enemy is hiding another ace up their sleeve, his catapult should work well enough to defeat them. The king believes him, and then tells all the nobles to attend to their business for the day. Just then, Till comes there to pick Van up and brings Art along too. However, Art is really timid because she knows that her father will be here, and when she sees him, she freezes in her tracks. She remembers how her mother hated her and timidly asks her dad how is she doing. Her father is not even interested in talking with her and replies that everything is good at home, but he is busy right now with war preparations, so he can't talk. He leaves with that, and Art is still rattled by the meeting. Van asks her if she is not feeling well, and then asks Till to take her back to their place so that she can rest. Later that night, Van works on his strategy with his friends. He assigns Calm to lead their artillery, while Dee and Ortho sign up to protect them from the enemy attack. Van is pleased to hear that, and Mira remarks that it is time for the decisive battle. She says that since Yeleneta Kingdom took the fortress that was called impenetrable so easily, it means that the age of elemental mages is over, and the age of technology has begun. Dee asks her if she thinks that Yeleneta has the strongest military in the world now, but Mira thinks that Van could single-handedly defeat their army with the unique weapons he makes. The next day, the war begins and the army charges ahead towards the fortress while Van stays in the rear to observe the situation and give orders. As the leader of the Yeleneta army notices Scuderia army spreading up and attacking them from all directions, he thinks that they are trying to weaken their defenses instead of barging in through the gate. He is not worried about whatever approach they take because he has the upper hand. He orders his archers to fire at the advancing army, but Van was ready for this. He tells Dee to start the operation, and he immediately orders his men to pull out their shields. The shields block the rain of arrows like it is no big deal, and the Yeleneta general is shocked at the sturdiness of the shields. However, the shields are not made from vibranium or adamantium, but using wood, just like most of Van's creations. Zoro's estranged brother decides to bring his mages into play and tells them to destroy the shields. Their combined attacks start overwhelming Dee and his soldiers, but he tells them to endure the attack because another group will bail them out soon. Just then, a fireball hits the gate of the fortress and Zoro from Alibaba panics when he sees the archmages gathered in front of the gate. He realizes that the army here was just a distraction so that the gate would be left undefended. But it is too late for that. Under Jalpa's command, the mages attack the door, and finally, Jalpa and Ferdinando do a combo attack to blast it open. With that, their main force charges into the fortress, but the enemy general commands his army to stop them at all cost. An intense close-quarter battle starts inside the city, and the knights find it hard to face the Yeleneta army's elite soldiers. Suddenly, Mira dashes to rescue them and blast away some enemy soldiers, giving Dee and his men the chance to advance. Meanwhile, Jalpa is also having some trouble with the enemy soldiers, but Ortho and his team come to his rescue. They swiftly take out some enemy knights, and then the Mohawk crew also wreak havoc. Jalpa asks Ortho if they all are Van's men, and he affirms, leaving him confused about how to react. Meanwhile, Yeleneta general starts panicking as the tide turns against him. So he decides to unleash his most powerful weapon. He orders the Wyvern squad to attack the enemies, and a bunch of wyverns immediately take to the skies. That is what Van was waiting for, and he tells Calm to shoot them down. Calm commands the catapult squad to shoot the wyverns, and they fire balls loaded with sharp shurikens in the air. The balls explode, sending deadly shurikens everywhere, and that is enough to bring the wyverns plummeting to the ground. Everyone is overjoyed by this success, but one lucky wyvern has enough plot armor to survive the attack and the fall. It gets up, ready to attack the soldiers who realize that they don't stand a chance against it. Ortho and Kuzala rush to their aid and attack the wyvern, but they don't have enough power to pierce its thick skin, even with Van's weapons. However, they just wanted to pin the wyvern to the ground to let the ballistae fire at it and finish it off. Despite the numerous arrows sticking out of its body, the wyvern is not dead, so Mira steps up to finish the job. She hollow purples the poor wyvern's ass, and then Dee rushes ahead to behead it and steal the kill. With that, the wyvern squad is wiped out, and Mira tells the soldiers that the hardest part of the battle is over. Ferdinando and Jalpa can't believe that Van's soldiers are capable of all this when they underestimated him this entire time. Yeleneta General also realizes that he can't win this battle now and decides to run for his life, but Ortho and Kusala are already at his location, and he gives up even the idea of escaping on seeing them. After the war ends, Jalpa begins leaving the battlefield, and Mersha asks him if he doesn't even want to see Van before he goes. Jalpa replies that he was wrong about Van's abilities, and he doesn't want to face him now. At the same time, Van is celebrating their victory with his friends, and Dee tells him that all the glory goes to him. Van acts modest, saying that he just issued commands from the rear, and they did all the hard work on the front line. Just then, Ortho and Kuzala come there with the Yeleneta General, and Mira immediately steps forward to torture him and get all the information out of him. The guy craps his pants on seeing a mommy knight and reveals that their plan was to attack 3 locations of the Scuderia Kingdom to grab a large chunk of its territory. Van's village and Scudit were 2 of their targets, while the third target is the Ferdinando County, which is the most terrifying news for Art.